gestir, við erum velkomin á ráðstefnuna Hennar rödd. Við heitum Björk og Kolbeinsdóttir og erum stofnendur Félagasamtökina Hennar rödd. Við verðum fundarstjórar hér í dag, en ráðstefnan fer sem sagt fram á íslensku og ensku og verður túlkað yfir á pólsku og ensku eins og þið sjáið hér á skjánum fyrir aftan okkur. Þetta er í þriðja skipti sem samtökin Hennar rödd halda ráðstefnu málefni kvenna af erlendum uppruna, en samtökin voru stofnuð árið 2018 með það markmiði að auka vitund meðal almennings á stöðu kvenna af erlendum uppruna í íslensku samfélagi.
Já, í ár munum við fjalla stöðu kvenna af erlendum uppruna, hvað var heilsu, en það hefur ekki hlotið nægan hljómgrunn í samfélaginu til þessa. Heilsa er mikilvægt viðfangsefni sem hægt er að nálgast frá ólíkum sjónarhornum og í dag verður meðal annars rætt geðheilsu, kynheilsu og viðmót frá heilbrigðiskerfinu.
Dagskráin á ráðstefnunni í dag inniheldur erindi fagaðila á ýmsum sviðum og 2 pallborðsumræður með konum af erlendum uppruna. Í hádeginu verður svo boðið upp á veitingar frá veitingastaðnum og svo verður kaffihlé klukkan 2:20 og það verður samkomustund í forsalnum hér fyrir framan eftir síðustu pallborðsumræðum Víkur, þar sem það verða veigar í boði og stuttir tónleikar líka.
Svo langar okkur að láta alla vita að það er grímuskylda í salnum nema þegar það er verið að njóta veitingar. Í forsalnum er ekki grímuskylda svo lengi sem við dreifum okkur vel og að lokum langar okkur að biðja allum að setja símana sína á silent. Á þeim nótum hefum við fjölbreyttar og fróðlegar umræður heilsu kvenna af erlendum uppruna á Íslandi og bjóðum við heiðursgest okkar velkomin upp á svið, virðulega forsetafrú mun flytja opnunar ávarp ráðstefnunnar.
Góðan daginn, góða gestir. Ég ákveð að halda ávarpið mitt á ensku, móðurmáli mitt, í dag því að ég var með þann valkostur og þá þurfið ekki að hlusta mig að beygja orð rangt og svona á íslensku. Og það er líka kannski því miður meira vandamál fyrir fólk sem er að túlka af því að ég ætla ekki endilega að lesa allt saman, heldur bara að spjalla á meðan, en takk fyrir fólk sem eru að túlka á meðan að ég er að tala. So I will switch to English now. First of all, I want to congratulate Elinborg and Björk and everybody who is working with them for putting together such a wonderful agenda and for having this brilliant idea and concept of an organization to talk about the joys and challenges and issues facing women of foreign origin here in Iceland. Thank you very much, and I know that this organization will just vax og dafna, as we would say in Icelandic, over the next years. And of course, today's topic is women's health, and I think COVID has given us all a lot of extra reason to pause and think. It's had an impact on all of our health, not just on women of foreign origin. And COVID took its toll to varying degrees on everyone, though of course it's really just shone a light on what it is that all of you are going to be talking about today. And for me, at least during COVID, I decided to set my goals low. My only goal really was not to break my children, and everything above that was going to be bonus. And for me, at least, what saved my mental health during COVID was that I wrote a book. And I wanted to use the sort of extra time that I had, because people don't ask first ladies to deliver speeches or open conferences all that much when there's a global pandemic. So I decided to try to use my brains to write a book. And I wrote a book about something that I feel very strongly about, which is gender equality and Iceland, and what it is like to be a woman in, quote unquote, the world's best country for women. And that, of course, includes being an immigrant woman in this country and what exactly that means. So there is a chapter in my book that is specifically on women of foreign origin. Women of foreign origin appear elsewhere, of course, throughout in the book, but there's a chapter specifically on the joys and challenges of being foreign-born in this country. And I thought, because there's all these wonderful panel discussions and speeches and everything now, and because I confess sometimes I'm a little bit lazy, that I would just read from you a very few short paragraphs from that chapter of the book, which encapsulates a little bit my overall perspective or opinion on being a woman of foreign origin in Iceland. And so it doesn't specifically have to do with women of foreign origin and healthcare, but women of foreign origin overall. So I hope you will indulge me for that as I read something briefly from that book, something hopefully that some of you would be able to find things to identify with. The chapter is actually called Þetta fólk. Each chapter in the book is called usually an Icelandic phrase like rúsinan á heilsu or gefa undir fótinn. And so this one is called Þetta fólk, and it's a reference to, for those of you immigrants who've been living here for a long time, as I have, might remember a campaign that the International House did in about 2005, I think, where they did produce t-shirts that said, "Ég þetta fólk" on them. And I had one of these t-shirts, and I thought it was great. So the chapter is kind of named after that. And I talk a little bit about how there's no cookie-cutter immigrant experience. So I recognize and I know that in a sense I fall into the most privileged category of immigrant. I'm an educated, able-bodied, cis, white, heterosexual woman who speaks English as a first language and who moved here because of an Icelander and therefore had this sort of slightly inbuilt network. So I recognize and acknowledge that privilege, but also know that there's nevertheless still challenges in being an immigrant. So I thought I would just read a few of the paragraphs that come at the very end of my chapter after I've talked about that and after I've told the stories of 3 women who I profile in the book. And now for the people who are translating, this is the second part of what I sent you, so hopefully it's a little bit easier, but I've made it shorter because nobody wants to listen to really long speeches. So, I used to be regularly asked why my husband and I had chosen to make Iceland our joint home and not Canada. The answer initially was pragmatic. He had been missing enough of his daughter's childhood while he was studying in England, so he returned every summer to be with her. He would never continue that separation beyond what was necessary. But I was always a little surprised at the insecurity the question belied. Why wouldn't we want to make Iceland our home? It is safe, clean, open-minded, and socially responsible toward its citizens. Achieving various unplanned milestones over months and years convinced me of the truth in a mantra I had used since moving here. I belonged. There was the first time I recognized someone as Guðni and I strolled down the street, and I had to introduce them to Guðni rather than the other way around. When I finally got a joke in Icelandic during the annual Áramótaskaupið. Or the first of what would be many Björk sightings. It took effort. Despite my international work experience, a graduate degree from Oxford, and speaking English and French, when desperately seeking a job, I was turned down for interviews for global marketing roles for the sole reason, or so I was told, that my degree was not in marketing. I arrived at informal parties where the room fell silent as I, a stranger, entered and was greeted with stiff smiles and no words after introducing myself in faltering Icelandic. To this day, when Guðni and I host large receptions at the presidential residence, there is always at least one guest who speaks to me first in English and not in Icelandic. While their intentions may well be to put me at ease, this still belies assumptions they have made about my ability to speak Icelandic, despite having lived here for almost 2 decades. I love living in Iceland, of course. I am grateful to have made it my home and the country where we are raising our family. Arlette, Claudia, and Rose, those are the 3 people who I profiled earlier in the chapter, have also built enriching, rewarding lives for themselves here. 30 years ago, women like us were not so commonplace in the capital and elsewhere. If asked, a majority of people in Iceland will say this is a positive development. I certainly do. But for us immigrants to make the most of our lives here, and for our society to do its best by us to the benefit of everyone in the country, we need to be aware of the challenges that women of foreign origin face. Challenges such as living in isolated locations without built-in support networks, tackling prejudice, and being aware of our rights to fair treatment in the eyes of the law. We are rightly proud of our approach to gender equality in Iceland. But one of the largest impediments to achieving it is by overlooking, and I optimistically believe more by omission than design, to treat those people, þetta fólk, people like me, Arlette, Claudia, and Rose, equally. Not just in policy, but in practice. We should accord all our fellow humans respect and kindness. But it's important to make an extra effort when choosing whom to hire for a job, or interview for an article, or when making predetermined assumptions about our motivations, abilities, or experience. These moments make a big difference. Until we achieve, I only have one sentence left, but it's okay. I'll do it all again. Until we achieve this consistency, true gender equality will remain out of reach. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Nú snúum við okkur að næsta erindi dagsins, en það flytur hún Naimo Fiasco. Naimo Fiasco sómalísk kvenréttindakona sem býr hér á Íslandi. Hún upplifði nauðungarsjónaband og limlestingu á kynfærum kvenna, FGM, þegar hún var barn. Naimo rekur nú góðgerðarstarf sem heitir Midsjó, félagasamtök sem starfa nú á Íslandi og í Sómalíu. Naimo gat fyrir mér ekki verið með okkur hér í dag, og þar leiðandi sýnum við smá myndband eða upptöku af erindinu hennar.
Hi everyone, my name is Nichimo. I am really very glad to be here today. I would like also to thank Hennar for holding this incredible conference and choosing this very important topic that needs to be discussed. As a foreign origin woman living in Iceland, it's very important that we share and speak up our issues that we are facing in this country, because solution comes from realizing the problem, creating the platform that can be discussed towards the solution. So it's very important for us that we always speak up our challenges and different kind of forms of issues that we are facing here. In this conference, I am going to talk about a little bit female genital mutilation. I am from Somalia, and Somalia is one of the highest country that is practiced this harmful act. Around 98% of Somali girls are circumcised, and many are still even facing to any minute, any second as I am recording this video right now. Sadly, I was one of these girls when I was circumcised. I was around 3 to 4 years old. I can't remember the pain when it was taking a place, but I'm still suffering the long-term health effects that I get from being circumcised. In 2019, it was for the first time when I asked the question myself, which type of female genital mutilation that I am. It was also for the first time that I went to gynecologist and asked this question as well, because I was finally ready to know the type I am. And at the time I was in the UK studying there, and the gynecologist I went there told me that I was maybe somewhere 3 to 2. type 2 to 3. But she said she wasn't sure about it, so she is going to book appointment for me to expertise who can clarify for me the questions that I had in mind. And then pandemic came, I never got that appointment. A year later, I just thought like, why not trying to find out more in Iceland, since I was just home and studying. So I went to a gynecologist here in Iceland and asked the question that I would like to get operation. She told me she is going to talk to some part of Landspítali to send email, and once she heard from them, she will let me know around March or April. I met again my gynecologist in May, and she told me that she haven't heard from them yet. So I just thought that I still is a question I ask myself. I don't even know if Iceland had any kind of cases like that someone has been done the process of operational this kind of operation here in Iceland. It's very little information that's available, and there's not so many people who related to you that you can discuss about this. It was only my gynecologist, and she said she is going to ask these people in some part of Landspítali, and we haven't heard from them. I also remember that I always getting too much pain for my period. It was something that I was always suffering more than normal pain that every girl gets. I remember that my foster mom, when I was in framhaldsskóla, I used to always skip for first day in school for that, because of the pain I was getting in my period for first day. And my foster mom didn't like that, and she always used to say that it's okay girls to get pain for during their period, so you don't need to skip school for that. And I could never tell that my case was different, you know. I could never say that because I am a circumstance, this is the reason that my pain is you know, different. I remember back in 2017 or 16, one day the blood just couldn't come out, and it was too much pain, and I had to go to ambulance, and they take me to Landspítali. And you know, when they asked me what's wrong, because I was just too much of pain, and I just couldn't tell what was wrong with me, because I never felt comfortable talking about female genital mutilation, because I always felt so shy. I could talk about generalization of female genital mutilation, but I could never discuss about what my vagina is going through, you know, because I was very shy and uncomfortable even saying the word vagina. And this because talking about vagina in Somali community remains taboo, and this is the reason why the word vagina is also stigmatized. But if we want to raise awareness on female health, you know, we must feel comfortable talking about our vagina. So at the time, I couldn't tell my stepmom, like, my case was different the reason I'm skipping school for first day just because of period. And because I was very uncomfortable even saying the word vagina at the time. I couldn't ask or go to gynecologist before 2019 and discuss about like me being circumstanced and on all that, because I as a little I was always told that, you know, it's so shame and you should never talk about this, you should never say this word, and it kind of makes you not even to seek for help because you just don't feel comfortable some part of your body, you know, and you are being shy of even talking about it, you know. So however, over the years I pushed out of my comfort zone and realized that how important it is that we you know, we speak publicly and also try to somehow raise awareness, the stigma and the shame that surrounds just mentioning the word vagina in our Somali community as well. And like, so this is the reason I was also recently doing this campaign called Sealand, which is vagina land in translation in English, or Bikaland in Icelandic. And the aim of this campaign was to normalize the word vagina, just like ears and noise, and so that girls can feel comfortable talking about their health issues, you know, and also feel comfortable more about sharing their stories and the struggle and the suffering that they are going through just because being circumstanced. That's why I am wearing now a t-shirt that's Félagasamtökin, where you can see the logo of the vagina. It's a campaign that we recently actually doing. But in Iceland, there are a lot right now different foreigner backgrounds are coming here, and some of these communities are practiced there back home, and some are right now still suffering the same I was while they are in Iceland, and I don't know if they have the accessibility of information where they can get help, even if the help exists, if they know that, you know, because maybe some are still struggling psychological way that this will also affect you, you know, your psychological way actually, because you always think there's something wrong with you because some part of your body is missing and you are, you know, less than other girls, and you're not really gonna feel comfortable in your body, you know, which it somehow affects you, your mental, you know. It's something that I am just processing still, you know. So I wish that those women who are now in Iceland will be provided psychological help to come just to the state where they can talk comfortable about this and seek help. Takes a lot of time and a lot of years even to say that this what happened to me is wrong, and there is nothing to be ashamed of some part of my body, and I'm going to seek help. It takes a lot of time and effort, so I hope that they can be provided that kind of support. At the same time, make easy for those who are now trying to get the operation like me, more accessibility in the operational system. And thank you so much again, and thank you for all listening, and I appreciate it for your time, all of you. For those who would like to support our campaign, can go to our website meetshow.org and purchase our t-shirt to raise more awareness. This campaign that I'm doing is called Peakland or Sealand in Somali language, which just to normalize and remove the stigma that surrounds our vagina. So thanks so much again. Bye.
Næst upp á svið Alma sem flytur erindið sálræn vanlíðan meðal kvenna af erlendum uppruna. Okkur langar til að benda ykkur fyrst á að hægt að senda inn spurningar sem Alma mun svara eftir erindið með því að fara inn á heimasíðuna www.menti.com og slá inn kóðan sem þið sjáið hér á skjánum 55578858. Alma fædd og uppalin í Mexíkó, starfar hér á Íslandi sem sálfræðingur og sérhæfir sig í að sinna innflytjendum og flóttafólki. Alma, gjör svo vel.
Let's try something new. And think of yourself and people around you that is close enough and you know well. And think if during the last year, you or somebody experienced change in their life, like change in health, change in responsibilities at work, maybe begin or end school, death of a family member, of a friend, divorce, pregnancy, or change in residence. Life happens, and any significant life change in life can be stressful, even happy event like a wedding or a job promotion. But negative events, such as death in the family, can be significant sources of stress. And even stress is a normal condition in certain circumstances. When stress is intense and frequent, can lead in psychological distress. Experiencing negative events in life is a human condition. All people will experience them at one point or another. Still, some sectors of the population are in higher risk or facing negative life events due to policies, social policies, and social practices that put them in a disadvantage. And these vulnerable groups are women, refugees, and immigrants. And we come together today to talk about women, immigrants, and refugees. When people migrate, they are moving in direction of the life they wanted to live, in direction of what or who is important for them. They have to pass through many filters in order to get a legal status, including physical examinations. However, the health of the immigrants tends to reduce with the time, over the time. This is called the healthy immigrant effect. Disappointment and depression can occur early as a result of immigration-associated losses, or later when initial hopes and expectations are not realized, even when immigrants face structural barriers and inequalities. We have the social determinants of mental health, and is directly associated to public policy norms, social norms, to public policies, social norms, and unfair opportunities. Poor mental health is highly associated with unfair distribution of opportunities. However, immigrants and refugees are less likely to seek or be referred to mental health services. Women of foreign origin in Iceland usually experience depression or anxiety, but they focus on physical symptoms. They go to the medical doctor, they cannot find the origin of the discomfort, and can be really frustrated for the patient and the doctors. Post-traumatic stress disorders are common in refugees, depression and anxiety in general immigration population, and immigrant youth, the young people are in higher risk for trauma, mood disorders, behavior disorders, and problems resulting of abuse of substances. Therefore, it's important to use effective methods and correct psychological approach to diagnose and to treat the problems of the immigrant population. Immigrant population and refugees are not having abnormal responses to normal situations, like to fear of riding an elevator. Many women of foreign origin in Iceland usually express pain, extreme tiredness due to physical conditions at work, loss of life satisfaction, and lack of social support. You can read here some of the testimonies of my patients allowed me to share with you. An absence of social support is associated with suicidal ideations and behavior. With an inattentive or invalidated social network, or in the absence of the social network, active assistance and suggestion of possible alternatives for solving the person's problems will not be available. Therefore, health reduced, quality of life reduced, and vital satisfaction reduced. The most common barriers to seeking help among immigrant women include the lack of the access to access to psychological services, as well many roles and responsibilities immigrant women have at work and at the workplace or at home. I have even some patients cannot come to therapy because they don't have time. They go through a long path to get the therapy through the union or the social services. However, they left work at 4 and have to pick them kids at 4, so there's no time for the therapy. As well, I have to show flexibility on my work time. Usually I work after 5. That is the time when my patients can come to therapy. As well, women refuse to use medical treatment because they know there's psychosocial problems. They can notice there's nothing wrong with them. As well, some of the barriers is women of foreign origin are really afraid of stigmatization, and they don't want to get into problems, for example, with children protection, because the stigmatization of mental problems. We need to check the protective factors of person so they can get over the negative events of life. This is a template of what I use in the therapy. Step 1, they have to realize warning signs that make them to feel psychological distress. And step 2, identify internal coping strategies like meditation, hobbies. However, this is just one step. Mindfulness is not a treatment. Mindfulness is not a solution. Neither yoga or things like this. These are just coping strategies. Number 3, persons have to put, I cannot see here number 2, but usually number 3, they have to write at least the name of 3 persons, of 3 social groups. They can get distracted. They have difficulties just to write 1. And number 4, they have to write social groups, organizations that help them. They can call when they need help. They cannot write any, usually. And in the last one, there is more like institutions, when they can go when they're in crisis. It's very difficult for them to fill the document too. There is not information. So number 3, 4, and 5 usually is empty in this template. So I have to help the patients to get the information and to solve the problems. Sometimes I have even to leave my office to help them to find a solution to the problems. It's intervention in crisis, especially when suicidal thinking or behavior. Everybody feels empathy, everybody shows empathy, but not many have experiences the discrimination. No one should expect to feel comfortable talking about this. Difficult conversations are necessary to address these disparities. And those who lack lived experience must listen with humility and respect to what others say about their encounter with unconscious bias and institutional discrimination. Thank you to the organizers for designing this safety displays for us to discuss our experiences.
So the first question that I'd like to ask you, Alma, how do you think that we as mental health professionals could reach migrant groups that suffer from mental health
I suggest cultural humility. We will never be competent of the culture of the other one. We must to respect them, and we must to get a sensitive approach and to persuade them and to take care of them, to gain their respect and the trust from them, and it works for me. I hope I answered this question.
Do you feel that it is important for psychologists in Iceland to have diverse cultural backgrounds?
A good training in psychology and refreshment education will be enough to get this, and of course plus the humility with the cultural humility. Any good professional could make an intervention with cultural diversity.
Would you say that people experience grief when they
Yeah,
migrate?
of course. We grieve the weather, the food, the music, friends. I have patients that they're having really complicated grief because of the pet. They don't have money or possibilities to bring their pets with them. So yeah, definitely. And grief as well is a human condition. However, we must to observe that it won't lead into a complicated grief.
Thank you. And the last question, how can we make psychological support more accessible to women of foreign origin?
Willingness with, I think this is for the system. This question is pretty much for the system. It's difficult to answer, but I can say from my own experience, I don't charge the full fee to those who cannot pay. It's of course vulnerable groups, usually are unemployed and anxious, depressed. I mean, they really need the help. So I prefer them to come with me and to make an agreement, even with a psychological contract, like to get the commitment for at least 5 sessions and to work really hard on this. As well, with the time work and the psychological centers, I mean, they're usually closed when the immigrants people are left work too. So I think it's about flexibility and the cost, the time, and of course the benefits and information for them to how to access to the social services. Remember that immigrants in general are usually not referred to these mental services. And please be annoying with your discomfort. Please make your voice listened.
Thank you. I have one more question which I feel is quite interesting. We have time for one more. Is there a database of resources here in Iceland where people in distress can look for help?
I'm not sure I understand this question.
Maybe like a collection of information that is accessible for the people so that they can find psychologists and people to look towards.
Yeah, there is in the Safening of Félagasamtökin. You can get the licensed psychologists and their training, their experience. Something else I suggest, even I know it's cheaper or probably more safety, like to call psychologists overseas. That is not good for us because there's no register of the real problem. And please, if you have your unions, if you have some benefits, use them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna.
Okay, næst flytur Nicole Leimosti, forkvenna, Women's samtakana, erindið líðan og þarfir kvenna af erlendum uppruna
Farið verður yfir niðurstöðu samtaka kvenna erlendum uppruna á Íslandi sem var gerð til að kanna aðstæður meðal innflytjenda kvenna meðan COVID-faraldurinn stendur yfir. Við minnum á að það hægt að senda inn spurningar á menti síðunni sem Nicole mun svara síðan undir lok erindisins.
Góðan daginn. Enn og eftir, takk herrlegri fyrir þessi átak framför í dag. My name is Nicole Lee Mosty. I'm the chairwoman of women. I'm very proud of this position. My slides will be in Icelandic today. I will speak in English. And I'd just like to say one thing. You might find a few mistakes in my slides in my Icelandic because I purposely decided that today I use my voice. I speak Icelandic with an accent, and as my good friend Joe once highlighted for us, we also write with an accent. So enjoy, but I think there's not too many. I think we're okay. This study was conducted to monitor the well-being indicators of women of foreign origin in our community during COVID. Media reports both here and abroad highlighted, a lot of disparages. There were a lot of differences between what were happening between migrants, people of color, people in lower income brackets in relation to COVID. Here in Iceland specifically, we had very high unemployment rates amongst people of foreign origin. There were media reports of increased violence, and as we have known through time that violence, at least in kvenna violence, women who experience domestic violence has been higher than the rate of women of foreign origin who live in Iceland. What else did I say? Yeah, and we, at Women, we were receiving requests that we weren't necessarily used to receiving regarding how women of foreign origin navigated systems and society, and we just really felt like we needed to take a pulse. We really needed to step up, find out what was going on, and create a little awareness. So we put together this little survey. Before we review the survey, I'd like to share with you, one of the last questions in the survey was an open question. What would you like us to do? Some things were very realistic, other things we know we need to tell anyone here who's in a professional, political, or any responsibility role, you need to do. But this question, this stuck with me. It sticks with me every day in all that I do, and I would like everyone to take this journey today with me, thinking of this woman's words. What I would like is a cultural guide, a buddy system. I'm quite socially isolated. I have 0 Icelandic friends, like real friends, who understand that I'm different. We're all different, regardless of whether we live in Breiðholt or Akureyri. That a person feels that they're excluded or isolated because of their difference. That's not the society we want to live in. So keep that in mind. The study, it's not research. We didn't look at this to, make any correlations and come with our own ideas about what's wrong or anything. We just wanted information straight from women of foreign origin in their voices. So just to say, we had 605 participants. The survey was offered online for just a few weeks. We threw it up on our social media. We threw out some emails. Here's the breakdown of how people answered. It was offered in 5 languages. English was the primary, with Polish being second. Icelandic people chose to answer a very low rate there. Russian, we had a high group of, and French 1. We did sort of a general ethnicity, but we didn't want to go too specific because of privacy laws and go too close into the bone, but we just kind of wanted to see if there were any red flags or anything that jumped up at us around a certain ethnicity or people from a certain region or something. And we also looked at the different area codes to see if there was anything else going on. And you see Reykjavik won the day. They had the most people who answered, just to see if there were any red flags. Which maybe told us that we need to do a little bit more in the rural areas so that people will respond. Education. Now I really want everyone to look at this. Ofmentin. Remember this term. It's very important. It's very important in building a society that we really look at people for their experiences and their knowledges. And here we have from gray all the way over to the dark blue, people who have educations from secondary, they've finished secondary all the way up to their doctors. The majority of foreign women who answered this survey, they are ready, they are willing, and they are equipped to do more than they're asked. Here are some regarding our unemployment status or employment status. You'll see the majority of women who answered are employed. And we asked, the percentage, if you are working 100% or more, because when I moved here as an immigrant, I was working 4 jobs the first 7 years. That's not healthy. We just wanted to know if that was still going on, if any of our respondents were there. And if people were unemployed, how that looked. Did it correspond with the months that we'd been going through COVID, this big spike? Or was there something else that we really needed to look at? Because remember, these are well-being things. If you're out of the job market and you're feeling isolated, this is a serious thing. 24 months, you're out of the system in many ways. You're not receiving benefits. You don't have the same access to support to getting back onto the job market. So these here had 10 months to 12 months. This is serious because when we did this survey in November, we weren't all the way through COVID. So something was happening before COVID on our numbers. And then we have 1 to 2 years, and then beyond 2 years. This is a group we really need to look at in respect to our, and then in the biggest picture, this is something that really alarmed me because the question was your feeling of security in connection with the labor market. Remember, the majority of women who answered said they were employed, and they were employed 100%. So it alarms me that the survey was 1, a feeling very secure, and 8 being insecure. This really troubles me, the fact that from 5 to 8, there's quite a jump. That a lot of women who are in the job market are very insecure about their status in the job market. This is something we really need to look at. And then we wanted to know about economic stress factors. This was really, really important to us. No surprise, housing is an issue. That's something we know. That is something that we know in general here in Iceland, especially if you live in the capital region. It's very stressful. It's a little bit of the Wild West, if I'm honest, especially if you're on the rental market. And 2019, the statistics in Iceland, they had put out, social indicators of immigrants. And it had said that more immigrants were on the rental market and were paying a higher percentage of their income towards the cost of housing. So that didn't surprise me. But really what alarmed me is here, this 259, medical or healthcare expenses. If you go back to the ethnicities, the majority of the women who answered were people from within the European Economic Community. They were on the job market. So we're talking about people who have rights to our healthcare system and our national insurance system. Why are then medical expenses so troubling for them? This is something we really need to look at. Is there something that's not happening right there? Do people not have the right information regarding their access to the costs of healthcare and the cost of, or is there something in our healthcare system that's costing us too much? For example, psychological assistance we don't have access to. And then the next things that trouble us are here, expenses related to school-aged children, clothing, self and or family, cost of food and necessities for the family. If we take these numbers together, that's really scary. That's really scary that, again, the majority of these women are in the job market and they're stressed about the cost of food, clothing their children, and having their children with social access. We have to remember that a part of integration is our participation. And when we're children, if we are not able to access those things, my children, for example, I know I just did a relocation within Iceland. My children didn't go with me because of the fact that they are so socially integrated. And that's so important for their well-being, for their identity. And we need to consider this, especially when it comes to children who are balancing the fact that they have diverse identities. At home, they may speak Polish and go to a Catholic church and have a whole thing, but in school they have another, and through sport and participation, they need to experience those things as well. So this was, and here, this is very important, our support network. This is nothing new. This is women since 2003. I know some of you founding women are here today, and you put a lot of effort on this. There you are. Stand up and be proud. On this, our support network. This is very important. We tried to put out the different things that we realized are societal, but also are obligatory from the powers that be. So when women answered that their immediate family, we define immediate family as our husbands and our children. That's our immediate family. That was the highest. That didn't surprise me. Extended family, that's really low. There we're talking about our sister-in-laws, our cousins, and a lot of us have, I know I have some sisters from another mother who are from another country now. They would be here the second highest, friends also of foreign origin. It's wonderful that we have a community where we feel accepted and we help each other, but that's not enough. We need to be integrated, not fast and deep where we live in our own pocket. We need to feel integration where it's fair and we are afforded every opportunity to integrate and feel supported everywhere. Iceland is so small. There's no reason that we shouldn't feel this. And then it gets really troubling, friends of Icelandic origin, because you're in the majority. Come on, step up, let's do this. Our co-workers. And this gets really troubling because if you remember what we did with Me Too, a lot of people were experiencing harassment in the workplace. If you don't feel supported by or you have a support network in your workplace, this is really disparaging. This is a trouble. It's something we need to look at. Here, sorry gals who are in Women with me, we need to step up. People didn't feel that volunteer organizations or NGOs or community organizations were a support network. And that's exactly what we are. So we need to make more awareness there. Social workers, now we're getting into the system. Social workers are probably one of the most important support networks in this country. This is a Nordic country. Nordic countries are built on the values of social integration, social welfare. Not welfare in, I need benefits, nay, welfare in that we have created a network to support you if you fall through the cracks. So the fact that people don't feel that they can look to social workers for help, for guidance, this is troubling. We need to do something there. Medical professionals were not considered support network. There is no more important social in a network than your doctor and the healthcare system. This is where your well-being lies. Members of religious communities, and then people said other. And there we had various answers. Some of them reflected different things that are here, they just didn't realize. And then we asked the most important things. What do you want? How can we support you? How can we create awareness? And we asked it from two perspectives. One, from support or empowerment groups, something that maybe we could put together, or inform other people that, hey, it's a good idea that you put together this because you have the knowledge and the power and maybe even the money to do it. And then what types of lectures or courses could we provide where you would get information that would empower you or help you and your well-being? Here we go. Icelandic took the cake every time. And if we go back to that second slide, someone wanted a buddy system, someone to talk Icelandic to them, someone to support them. There's one thing that I'd like to bring up here, and that is us long-timers. We've been here a few decades, we speak Icelandic. We got quite a few suggestions from newcomers, women who've recently moved to Iceland, that they feel pressured by us to do more. And I'd just like to say, we have a role to play also into facilitating that bridge with using Icelandic with newcomers. Like I said, I speak and write with an accent. It's good to share that because that's part of learning a language. So Icelandic courses, we need to do something here. Anyone working in the government in any relation, you need to step up. This is very important because this is something that provides us an access to all of this information we need and we want. Social isolation. You see here we have 3 different areas, and depression and anxiety. This is really, really troubling. If you take all of this together, we have way over the amount of people who answered the survey who say they would like support in setting goals and working on their self-image. They would like positive psychology and or mindfulness or different programs like this. They want to have support in regards to social isolation, and they want to have the tools for depression and anxiety. This is something we really, really need to consider, and we need to consider it with our diversity eyeglasses on. Depression isn't the same thing for everyone. As Alma came in on, there is a trauma to migration. There is a trauma to trying to fit into a new family with new culture. We need to look at these things. And then here, we sort of pulled together the things that were the most important to us. 5 opinions that we found very critical to highlight today. One is that an overwhelming number of respondents who requested support for teaching Icelandic. And this is directly linked to benefits for economic and social growth, not only in this country, but among us. We are of value. Help us with the language so we can provide as well. This is not a new issue, one that needs to be taken serious. Access to quality Icelandic language teaching is necessary for us to participate in the labor market, society, and adapt to Iceland in a new and safe way. Secondly, the demand for initiatives and services related to mental health and well-being is something that needs to be looked at from the perspective of a diverse population. Women with small support networks, which we have very small support networks, they may be less likely to seek formal counseling or mental health assistance. There may also be language barriers that need to be taken into account. We recommend that the health and welfare authorities take the time to examine why so many women requested this type of support from us. Next, there were a lot of requests for lectures and courses that, in our opinion, should be handled by public authorities, as it's related to the rights and obligations of all residents in Iceland, not just people of foreign origin. Although we as an NGO and advocates are willing to invest time and money in paying experts to hold these types of lectures and seminars, here we're talking about things like taxes, your health care rights. I forget some of the other ones that we pulled up there, but these are things that should not lie on the shoulders of people who are not specialists in these areas, but people who are responsible for making sure we understand how our taxes are done, what's done with our money, how we vote. Things like this. Social security systems, that's another one that there were a lot. They wanted to have a lot of information about that. We pointed out the very high portion of women who requested information related to returning to the labor market. Assistance with CVs, interview techniques, job searches and whatnot, 38.1% of them in fact. And rights in the labor market, 46.9% wanted to know something about this. We've also made requests for information and support regarding unemployment and opportunities. Women who came to us for advice or information found it difficult to approach the Directorate of Labor during COVID restrictions. We believe it's important for the Directorate of Labor to meet the diverse needs of the high percentage of unemployment foreign nationals in Iceland. It's very important that this is stated. And we were very disappointed and worried, I should say, about the few requests for information or support related to gender-based or domestic violence or sexual abuse. We expected more requests because, according to the media, there was a big jump during COVID. So this is something where we're hoping that people are looking out to Bjarkarlíð and Bjarmalíð and Kvenna atkvarf, but again, I'm really, really hoping that we're not experiencing something that happened before Me Too, where these voices were not being lifted up and they were not being addressed. Now, the fun stuff. What have we done? What did we do with what we got from these surveys? We added to and increased our peer support. We now do it weekly and we do it digitally, finding that then we have access to more people and a wider base. We updated our website to increase access to information, improve our presence to make it easier for people to find us. We offered a four-part course for digital finance literacy, taxes, wages, gig work, rights related to benefits and financial support systems. We got a lot of questions about maternity leave and things like this, so we put together these courses. We had 280 people registered for the course, which is amazing, at least for us, and over 200 attended. Because, you know, when we do things free, sometimes we don't get people attending, but it did. We also put together a 5-week closed support group in collaboration with the Anxiety Center in Iceland, KMS. 15 women were given 5 2-week-hour support group courses where they worked on anxiety, trauma, socialization through cognitive behavioral therapy. 2 board members, Achola and Margaret, they wrote amazing articles about gender-based violence that were put forward, the 16 days against gender-based violence. We tried our hand at online social gatherings to combat isolation, support the whole idea of connectivity, whether it be digital or otherwise. We did a 6 weeks mindfulness and well-being online yoga course. 50 participants registered for online yoga. I was one of them. 10 ladies, lucky ladies as I say, they were allowed to attend in person at the Reykjavik Yoga Studio. We're participating in a collaborative project with NGOs across Portugal regarding peer support and prevention methods for gender-based violence, and we've offered a few online courses with international specialists. We established a social garden, the World Garden, in collaboration with the Nordic House, where people come together and they're growing vegetables and working against isolation, and it's beautiful. Have an event tomorrow. To round it all out, we're offering again social opportunities for women of foreign origin to come together for parties. We had a grill party in June, and we're having a fabulous event tonight. Very excited. And I'd like to finish up with saying there's nothing but more on the way from us. We hope to conduct another survey and do more things with your support.
First question. In your survey, what did you do so that Asian or brown minorities were represented, given that their access and experiences could be completely different?
We were very careful when we set this up not to make the demograph so close that we would bring up identity questions, you know, because we have these things that are privacy laws. So we didn't ask specifically in regards to, with ethnicity, it was very general. And this is something we probably need to look at for the next one, but the questions were set forth in a way that people were afforded both to answer the limited and to give us open remarks. And so in the survey, it was open for, of course, everyone. We didn't do anything to restrict it. I would have loved for us to have been able to put it out in more languages, but being that we had no funding for this, we were working on a volunteer basis. And I always feel a little bit hesitant when we don't have a language to ask someone to freely go and translate something for us. So it's something we need to look at to do even better with the next one, but we had hoped that it was open enough that people felt they were free to say anything in relation to those issues. How should the buddy system be implemented? Oh, sorry. Buddy system isn't something I can initiate. It's not something our organization can initiate. It's not something a government entity can initiate. It's something that comes from a place of empathy. I guess the most important thing that can be done to initiate this is for us to speak higher and louder about the need for it. It has to come, if it's going to work, it has to come from a place of genuine interest in integrating and supporting someone. Nobody wants their buddy who drags them along. You want your buddy who's there to empower you and lift you up. So, creating awareness. What do you say? Is that a good answer?
So how can the healthcare system make information about healthcare services more accessible to women of foreign origin?
Number one, use translators. It's in the law. It's one of the few systems we have where it is determined by law that all patients have a right to a translator. Use them. Don't be afraid of them. hire more diverse people in the system. When it comes to information dissemination, access to more languages, use more videos. Videos are very good because they both images. You can say sometimes so many things with an image that documents things, and you can put in translations and you can have people talk over them. Those are a few steps that could get you on your way to doing so much more. And the other thing is put the information in places where people have access to it. Not everybody wants to go to Landsbítala website, right? Spread it around. Put it in the women's group. We'll put it there. Use the Multicultural Information Center to advertise for you. Use social media.
Iceland is known for its gender equality. Does that apply to all groups in society?
I think based on what you see here, no. I would say that. And I know that there are other studies that tell us the same thing. Our dear friend Claudia at rödd Legal, I'm trying to think what it's called in English. They did a survey, and there are plenty of us that are working in certain areas. We need access to move up. That's where the equality is. We need to be at the top so we can be implementers of change. So inclusivity comes from our voices and from our actions.
Nicole, should the focus be on becoming fluent in English?
No.
First?
I'm not even going to. 20 years ago when I moved here, I spoke English and people were willing to speak English with me. Had I not gotten support to speak Icelandic, I wouldn't be speaking Icelandic today. English can get in our way. And for some people, just the effort and energy that they have to put into learning English first will divert from the effort and energy that they need to use Icelandic. So we really need to do, we really do. And like I say, those of us who are longer coming, I was sitting at a dinner the other night and instinctively someone spoke English to me, so I spoke back. By the end of dinner, we turned it around and we were all speaking Icelandic, and it was wonderful.
Can we see the results? Or
Yes. Before I ran away, I was going to say, the study is published on our website, womeniceland.is, in both English and Icelandic. If you go on our page, you can switch between English and Icelandic, and it's published in both those languages. Hopefully, with time, we'll have it translated in other languages, but as I said, if we don't have funding for it, I don't like to ask other women of foreign origin to donate their time for such a tedious thing.
There are more questions, but we must stop here, but you can of course ask her during lunch.
Yeah. And you can send questions to me at Nicole at womeniceland.is or any of the board members. I'm accessible. Find me. I'm willing to answer anything.
Næst bjóðum við Jade Alejandra upp á svið, en hún heldur stutta kynningu á vinnustofunni sinni Djúpslökun, þar sem hún biður gesti að taka sér stutta stund til að öðlast traust á þögninni, skynja líkama okkar og heiminn án fordóma. Jade, gjör svo vel.
Hello. Thank you for having me here and giving me a space to share my experience with deep relaxation. Thank you, Chanel, and thank you, everyone. After the break, I will be sharing my experience in Iceland. So I would like to just tell you a little bit first how I came into the field that I've been working the recent years in deep relaxation. And it was somewhere in the middle of my studies in Vienna where a teacher told me about an actor, a very famous actor that would decide to, in the middle of the chaos of the setup and everything, he would take a chair and sit down and close his eyes and relax. And that stuck to me so hard that I became obsessed with the idea. And I started to try out different environments in the city, in Vienna, where if it would be very stressful if I could just take a moment to stand, sit, lie down on the floor in the middle of the chaos and relax. It was one of the most creative times of my life. And I would like to share with you that there is nothing more important than giving us a moment to feel how we are in this very second. Later on, of course, because of my personal experience, I went to dig into the field, and I did a diploma as a shiatsu therapist, and was also learning a lot of different disciplines that deal with the somatic processes of the body. And there has been a lot of work done. When we talk about the somatic body, we're talking about a layer of the body, the sentient, the feeling body. So we can imagine a very thin layer of our body that is connecting all sensations and all emotions. It happens to be that relaxation is a very, very complex process, and I'm very thankful for all the information that has been given before to let us be aware of all the challenges that our body encounters and that works against the relaxation. And I would also like to share for you that the deep relaxation is an enormous resource for basic health. When we're talking about deep relaxation, it's a little bit about balancing the forces. It's not about letting go and letting gravity do the work. It's achieving a certain flow in the body, and for that we need a certain alignment and also a constant movement. We are, in every single second, we are adapting and adjusting our body. And in this adjustment and adaptation, our body is reacting to external actions, which can benefit, we can benefit off, or can go against our health. So for a very brief moment, because it's much easier at will to close our eyes than to slow down the beat of our heart, I'm going to ask you and invite you to close your eyes for 1 second. And if you notice that you have your knees crossed or your hands crossed, maybe you can get into a position that's a little bit more comfortable for you. And we're not going to do anything but observe our body. We're going to observe how we are breathing, and we're not going to try to do anything. So you feel comfortable, uncomfortable, both emotions are welcome. If this is stressful, then you can open your eyes again. But if not, just let go for a moment. And let's think a little bit about that veil, that thin layer. And you can imagine maybe a layer of air. It can be closer to your inner part of the body, near the heart, or near the spine, or it can be just in the surface of your body. And that very thin layer of air is connecting all emotions and all sensations that we are going to welcome just for a minute. And let's see if we can all trust this moment for 1 minute. kindly ask you to remain with your eyes closed and pay attention just to the wrist of your hand to see if you can let go. And if you can visualize a little bit of air in the wrist. And that little bit of air will lift the wrist just gently and let go. And lift and let go. And just take a second to feel a difference if you can. And if not, it's okay. And you are welcome to open your eyes. So there are many, many little things, exercises, of course, moving the bones and moving the breathing that are in deep relaxation. But what this school, this learning process achieves is we make our body knowledgeable and we atomize reactions. Reactions are essential to human health. How we react to our environment, how we react to the person next to us, to every single thing we encounter. And if a reaction is positive, then we can achieve balance, and not only in a bodily experience, but also in a mentally and emotional, and more of everything, a social experience. So that's I took a moment and I was invited to give this moment to share of a field that I think is very important, the deep relaxation and generally relaxation, and to bring awareness that this is something you can practice every day, and that there are many schools and disciplines, and if anybody has questions, you can come in the break or now referring to the schools or courses or where to find out more information. So thank you very much.
Já, bara kæra þakkir fyrir þetta, Jade Alendra. Núna tökum við stutta hádegishlé. Ykkur er boðið að koma bara fram í forsalnum þar sem verður boðið upp á veitingar frá veitingastaðnum Vegan for World Peace. Og svo komum við aftur hingað inn fyrir seinni hluta ráðstefnunnar klukkan 1. Svo vil ég líka benda á að í forsalnum þar er hún Kaja Sigvalda sem er ljósmyndari sem er að vinna í mjög spennandi verkefni með okkur Hennar rödd, og hún er að selja plaggöt til styrktar verkefnisins. Þetta er sem sagt, já, við segjum ykkur kannski aðeins betur frá verkefninu og eftir, en þið geta alltaf skoða myndirnar here í forsalnum. Okay, so now we'll take a short break. You're welcome to join us in the foyer.
Við vonum að þið hafi notið veitingana, en nú er komið að fyrstu pallborðsumræðum ráðstefnunnar. Pallborðsstjóri umræðana er Nicole Lee Mosti, Woman. Við minnum á að hægt er að senda spurningar á mesti.com. Við sjáum hérna aftur kóðan sem þið þurfa að setja inn og þar getið þið spurt konuna spurningar og hérna þið setjið þá bara nafn konunar sem þið vilja vita svarið frá, sem sagt.
My name is Nicole Lee Mosti, as you know, still chairwoman at Samtökin Hennar, erlendum, uppruna. This panel will be conducted in English, and we'd like to invite Jade Alejandro, Nurashima Abdul Rashid to come up, and Carolina, I'm so sorry. Majar.
Almost.
I'll get it by the end of the day. Welcome. In the panel today, we're going to discuss our experiences as women of foreign origin within the healthcare system. And I'd like to, we'll start with Nanura. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Nura. I'm from Singapore, and I lived here for the past 25 years.
Hi, my name is Carolina. I come from Poland. I live in Iceland almost 6 years.
Hello, I'm Hada Alejandra. I'm originally from Mexico, and I've lived here almost 6 years.
Okay, thank you. We'll begin with our first question. We'll go across the panel entirely. We'd like to ask you to share with us your experiences of sort of the main obstacles for women of foreign origin receiving services within the healthcare system in Iceland. We'll start with Jane. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I had talked a little bit about this before. I was invited especially to talk about one experience, and I'm just going to make it narrow down to three highlights.
Could we just right now, just to sort of just say maybe what those three highlights are really quickly, each one, and then we'll go into depth.
Yes,
Okay.
so I will just, my first experience, which seems to be common, of course, coming here, I had several jobs and was under a lot of pressure. I was teaching, very exhausted, and I had a pop in my head. My arm went stiff. I panicked a little bit, but after I tried to remain calm, I called a friend, Icelandic friend, and she told me I had to go to emergencies. I was in kind of like also emotional crisis, so I decided to go home because I was very tired, and I had an episode, and then the next morning I called emergencies to say what was going on, and they told me to go to the hospital, to emergencies. I went there. I was hours waiting there. I finally was left. I was invited, taken in, and when the doctor came, he came and immediately when I did not speak Icelandic, he yelled at me to stand up and get out of the bed, that this was not, there was no reason why I was there, or that was not the right way to do it. The second experience, I was in a lot of pain, extreme pain, in the lower abdominal area, and I decided to call the gynecologist, which I thought was the specialist because I had also missed my menstrual period. And so I went to a checkup, and he told me that my uterus was 4.3, so something dilated, and he gave me a prescription for something to let all the little rubbish go away. I have a history in sensitivity, heart sensitivity, and I checked the prescription and decided to wait a little bit to see if it would go away. I generally tried to wait. Fortunately, I have an excellent house doctor here, of foreign origin, but he is excellent. And when the pain was unbearable that I couldn't stand up, I called him, and just through the phone, he immediately reacted that I had to do a pregnancy test. And he said, and no matter what, come the next day. So it turned out that I was pregnant. And I was lucky to, unlucky and lucky, right? So the third experience is my birth experience. I had also, I was in the middle of unfortunate circumstances. Unfortunate was that it happened to be that 1 week before knowing that I was pregnant, I realized that I had been 6 months in working in a fake contract where I was not going to be paid. I had suddenly to solve a lot of visa documents and to take over a low-skill job where I was then, during pregnancy, very mistreated. And fortunate because the care for pregnancy was good. I mean, much more privileged than I could have in other countries. And it was very unfortunate because I had to go through a lot of things. I was in a lot of pain. I would vomit a lot, and I was always meeting lawyers. I'm going to the unions, and it was a stressful pregnancy. So I tried to prepare the most I could for having my first child in Iceland without family support or any support. But I did not prepare for. So I prepared to give birth, but not what happened right after. So what happened? I had an excellent birth. I had it on the 29th of March, and on the 28th of March was the first case of COVID in maternity ward. So I gave birth in the peak of the COVID, and there was very little knowledge about the whole situation. So probably the hospital was not prepared. And I was notified on the day that my partner would have to leave an hour after birth. And I was practically left alone and without care after birth. And I was not offered a meal or water. And it was more or less 26 hours where I was not taken care of, where I begged to leave the hospital so I would be taken care of. And on the next day, fortunately, I had a very good midwife, and she immediately saw my conditions, and she asked about what happened, and I think she called the hospital to notify, and then they changed the regulations. But this, of course, affected, it was for me very difficult. Yeah. A very difficult experience to recover from. I went through a lot of, my body was a little bit collapsing, so I went through a lot of panic attacks and things that could be of postpartum depression, but I think it was more or less of, I was put my body to the limits. Right. So this is the experience that I've asked to share with you, and yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned a lack of trust, prejudice, language bias, even aggression towards patients, which could affect not only your sense of mental well-being, but again, then your system collapsed physically under this. We'll touch more into this after Carolina. Would you share us quickly your experience, what obstacles you encountered?
Well, I finished BSc Paramedic Science in Poland, and when I came to Iceland, I was really sure that I can work in ambulance, but I cannot. I cannot because the evaluation of my diploma, it's just, it's impossible. Mostly because of the language barrier. Icelandic language is very, very difficult. It is. And I'm learning almost every day. And I can talk about the weather, I can order food in restaurant, but I cannot learn the medical words. It's very difficult, especially if Icelandic people even not use it. So even my teacher when I'm asking about some words from ambulance, he got problem to explain it to me. And there is no school, language school in Iceland that can prepare me to work in medical profession. So actually I give up. I give up because I cannot do it, nothing with it. And when Edinburgh called me and asked if I want to be a part of this event, I was just only frustrated ex-paramedic with no hope to work, and I said yes. And 1 week later, I got, they diagnosed me with MS. So from the person that I was taking care of the patient most of my life, I start to be a patient. And I remember the doctor's appointment, and he told me, it looks that you cut a mess. We will meet next half year and we will see what can we do. And he didn't even explain me what kind of disease it is. I got a general knowledge about disease because of my profession, but I was actually quite shocked. So I came home. I need a couple weeks to thought about it, and I decided I probably need help. So I tried to find some psychologist that I can speak, and my doctor said that he can give me a referral to the psychologist, but he's an Icelandic guy, so he's not sure if he can talk with me in English, and also he's not sure if I'm supposed to talk with psychologists in English because it's not my mother language, right. So it's difficult to talk about emotion and feelings. So I found a Polish psychologist, and it's a wonderful woman. She helped me very much.
Here in Iceland, a licensed professional?
No, of course not.
No. Okay.
So she also got the problem with the diploma.
Which is very difficult in regards to your security.
Actually, I have to pay from my own pocket all the time. So we are not meeting as much as I need because it's expensive. And but a couple of weeks ago, I found this society in internet, MS Félagit. And I thought, okay, this is probably a good place for me. I can find some educational material. I can find some supporting groups. And I sent them email about it. And the answer was, unfortunately not. We don't have any educational material in English. And every courses and every support meetings are in Icelandic language because there was no need before to change it. They offer me a meeting with a social worker. I think she really tried to help me. She just don't know how. And so it was a couple of weeks ago. Until now, actually nothing changed. So probably they just also give up.
Let's hope that what we're talking about today really creates some initiative.
And that's what's bothered me. I'm not complaining on the system, because the system is making by the people, and it's enough to want to change something. And until now, I'm still hearing no. So the wall is quite big, and it's really hard to fight with this.
Thank you. I'll go more into depth into the different issues that you touched on, especially when it comes to that lack of diversity, not only in professionals, but in the willingness to open it up for diversity, as you experienced in getting your language recognized. Professionals being able to work with other people with other languages, it's very difficult. Nora, could you share with us your experience?
I think my experience has been actually quite positive. That's also because I've been living here 25 years. By then, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was already fluent in Icelandic. And the fact that when I was, I'm still working in a preschool, I'm a leikskólakennari. So I know 2 people in my preschool who was diagnosed with cancer. So I was able to get information from them as to the procedure of what's going to happen to me when I was being diagnosed with cancer. And then when I go and see the doctors and everything, I insist that they speak to me in English because, like you say, we do not know the medical lingo here in Iceland because we are not being taught the medical term when you are learning the basic Icelandic. So in that term, I was very lucky with my doctor's appointment. I was able to tell them, you have to speak to me in English, and they would do that. So my story would be on the positive side because I have been living here. I know Icelandic and I speak English, which is the first language in Singapore. But I'm also here to highlight the plight of other foreign women who is going through cancer, who does not have that support system. So that is something that we need to change, and we need to make full awareness for that. And for foreign women to know that there are other foreign women who are willing to help when they are suffering from MS, cancer, or any form of other disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So all of you touched on certain themes that had to do with certain, what did I write here? Insecurities that developed within yourselves because of your experiences that maybe you didn't have before, but because of your encounters with a system that wasn't inclusive or wasn't reaching in a manner to be inclusive. And this was very disempowering, created anxiety, doubts, which in translation means that there was a lack of trust that you would be okay in the very system that is, what do you say there? That's their role. Their role is to make sure we're okay. This is very frightening. If we go back into and give Jade a little more room to talk about her experience, there are quite a few there, so it'll be quite different. But you'd mentioned that doctors didn't take into consideration your prior medical history, and the lack of information and the trauma that it brought on for you left you feeling as if you were treated, and it left you with questions as to whether or not you were being treated this way because of your background. Could you maybe expound a little bit upon this?
Yes. When it came to the day of giving birth, I had there the very strong insecurity, am I treated like this because I'm a foreigner?
Could we have a tissue, please? This isn't okay. This isn't okay that anyone should feel like, regardless of their ethnicity, thank you, their ethnicity or background, that they don't have equal access to a basic human need. Thank you, kindly.
Yeah, but I'm completely fine. It's just, I guess, when you talk it in public, it's a little bit more strong.
Well, this is a safe space. Today is a very safe space to talk about this. And very important that people understand this.
No, I think you just touched the most important point, is how vulnerable you can come to such an important part of your life. And this has a history. And that's why I mentioned the two things before, because my health was in a very, it was not solid, and I had a lot of insecurity that now I can see now, because I feel much, much stronger. I've gone through a lot, and I have a little daughter that's extraordinary and that I take care of, and I can take care of her. So that means that my health is good. And I've been a foreigner most of my life because I grew up in Scotland. I was a few years in Mexico, and then I lived in Vienna. But I had never felt a foreigner.
So your experiences in those countries, were they very different, or did you
they were very different. And I've had also a lot of really great experiences here in Iceland, which is the reason why I stay, of course. I guess my experience regarding the health in Iceland, a lack of understanding of the background that you come with. I've been very vulnerable in that point. Yeah.
Thank you. Another theme that was touched on, and Carolina, we'd like to look to you for maybe, while we have this platform, we should definitely use the opportunity to throw out our opinions of what needs to be done. So when it comes to this cultural sensitivity and even cultural humility, if we should go so far, regarding, I'm going to throw out another thing, professional assimilation. There's a lot more space for different backgrounds in the professional area and how we treat patients. Could you expound a little bit more on this? Maybe talk about that lack of diversity, and especially when you talked about the psychologists.
Actually, my contact with the doctors and nurses and other employers of Landspitali was quite really good. I cannot complain about it. They were really nice. They always speak with me in English. But I think it's just because I've got this medical knowledge. I know how to ask the right question. And I'm quite a strong person, so it's not easy to, like push me to the back. So, no, I don't have any bad feelings about it. But I live in Keflavik. Our hospital in Keflavik, it's a shitty hospital. There is a joke that if you will have an accident in Keflavik, you're supposed to run to Reykjavik. Or take the airplane and go to another country. So, one day my friend was really, really sick, so we called the ambulance, and because they didn't know what to do in Keflavik, so what was obvious, they decided to move her to Reykjavik. So they ordered an ambulance, and I was driving with them in the ambulance and with my friends. And unfortunately, she started to breathe in the middle between Reykjavik and Keflavik. And there was 2 people in ambulance, very young people. I have no idea how experienced they have in this profession, like paramedics. Probably they are not paramedics because there is no program of paramedics in Iceland. I don't know, maybe the people just finished some courses, or actually I don't know. But she stopped breathing and they just didn't know what to do. And I start CPR, like strange person in strange country, in ambulance, and I start CPR. They help me. That's nice.
That's very reassuring.
Yeah, it's easier. And we were waiting 15 minutes for another ambulance with more experienced crew. And finally, she's okay now. And she finished the treatment in another country. Because sometimes I feel that in Iceland you've got only 2 diseases, epilepsy and depression.
Yeah.
That's the most common disease.
Well, what can be improved? Throw us out some ideas.
There is a lot of people from abroad with medical knowledge, experience, and I know physiotherapists, psychologists, paramedics, nurses. They cannot work, and they're supposed to work because they got extremely a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience.
Yep.
In Poland, we've got 5 million people. I know that Iceland is a small country, and with small people with disease and accidents, it's obvious. So, but we cannot work because of the language. And I think it would be quite easy to hire us, let us work, and let us learn the language through the work.
Labor market language. It's not enough for us to, we can all go to the wonderful places that have, the beginning, so we can, order a drink or go to the airport. But when it comes to that professionalism, Iceland is missing out on exactly what you say, all that experience and that knowledge that could continue to develop our healthcare system. Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
There's a little theme that I noticed between the 2 of you. You both spoke, not your clothes. You both spoke about being aggressive yourselves and having a prior knowledge. In Icelandic, you call it ákveðin, or it's not easy, is it, for people in our positions to be that way? Whereas Jade, in your situation, you maybe didn't understand the boundaries of how being ákveðin and frekar, and if you had had that knowledge, could have maybe improved your situation. What can we do in our healthcare system? I've gone off script, by the way, people. Sorry, Chanel and Ellenborg, this is too good to miss. But what could we do to improve the healthcare system that you don't have to show up and you don't have to be aggressive, and because as been highlighted today, a lot of us don't have background information about how the healthcare system works, or even about what's going on with us. If I started to have issues with MS tomorrow, I would have no idea what I was going through, or what questions to ask, so what can be done?
What can be done? I mean, the doctors definitely has to see us as a patient. Look in our eyes directly, and if the patient is uncomfortable talking in Icelandic, you should ask, do you want me to speak in English, or would you prefer we have an interpreter present? It doesn't cost that much for doctors to call in somebody that speaks the language of the patient. So,
Can I just ask really quick?
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned earlier in mine, interpreters by law. Did any of you, at any point, were you offered or did you ask for an interpreter?
Never.
Never. And do you feel that this would be a good step forward if this was something that was genuinely followed?
yes, I mean, definitely, because it's like if you're working as the reception in the healthcare system, you see the name of the patient, which is a foreign name. You pick up that phone, you tell them your appointment is at this time, and I see that you are from a different country. Do you need an interpreter when you come for this appointment?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take that much to add this line.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it comes from there, the receptionist. It starts from there.
Mm-hmm.
You have to offer.
Would this have helped you? Would you have felt any more security or?
Languages, I have a strange connection to language because I speak different languages. But I do know one thing is that I try to speak more Icelandic and practice, the phone calls when I would call to the doctor with the receptionists. Because it's never the problem with specialists. It's like getting through this.
Receptionist.
Yes, or also with the unions. It's not the specialists where I have encountered the problem, except by this. Well, no, not true. But two other doctors. No, but and after birth, and still now, I have stopped doing the effort to try my Icelandic on the phone because it's so it became so tiresome for me to even put an effort to communicate in that. What right now I think it's not important because now there's so many things very important and where I have to be very, very present. And I have noticed that it's from the reception there's like a negative feeling towards when I directly speak English or ask if I can do it in English. And I just agree when it's a matter of healthcare, and we're in a very privileged country. And the thing is that there was no real tragedy to what happened to me. The tragedy is that there was absolutely no need for it.
Mm-hmm.
Not here. And so there are things that there are no need for. And health system, especially, should in many countries be provided in different languages if there's a community of of immigrants. Immigrants belong to the world and to the whole human history. Humans have been moving throughout the whole time. And we have solved many technological problems, but we have not managed to solve basic social problems. So it starts in the schools and education. For me, the problem, health and education here should have no issue.
So the lack of inclusivity is an issue.
Competency, basically.
Yeah. You mentioned with professionals, access to professionals that speak diverse languages, professionals who have a knowledge of working with diverse people. And Noor, in preparation for this, you came in on a really, really good point, and that has to do with the visibility of women in foreign origin. Would you like to share this with our audience?
Yes, definitely, because I've just recently held, in celebration of my 10th year of cancer-free party. Like I said, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I do not know of any foreign women who has gone through cancer, and I can't talk to anybody yet at that time. So I was lucky enough to have the two co-workers with me in the Lake Scholar to get that help. So that is why I think with the 10 years that I've been cancer-free and working with women of Samtökin Hennar, erlendum, I think it's time that us foreign women who has gone through any sort of illness, we need to step up, show our face, so that we can support other foreign women who are also going through a similar phase, so that they will not feel alone. Because I know that when I went through cancer, my family is in Singapore. I have 2 kids at that time. They were 7 and 4, and I was then married. And to get that news you have cancer was a big shock, because nobody in my family has cancer. And to be the first one having it was tremendous shock. But I got through it. I knew exactly what I was getting into with the chemo, and I just had to fight, because I have 2 beautiful girls who were 7 and 4 years old, and they were now 17 and 14, and they're so proud that I did the charity event on Thursday. And I guess we need to have that support system here in Iceland, among friends, because definitely it's not easy without family members here, and being in the peer counseling for women, and knowing that even though I'm also part in Crafter, Stunningsnät för folk who are diagnosed with cancer, most of the people that come through me knew me of word of mouth, or who has been with women, and I've came to help. And I know one of them is here, that is Laura. She used to be also on the board member of Women. Basically, I talked to her with what she's going to go through, with the chemo, with the surgery, with the radiation, and how it would feel like when you lose hair and everything. So she is prepared for what's coming to her.
Something Icelandic women maybe don't realize, as if when we speak about domestic violence, that there is sort of a natural inbuilt support network among those which we know, and when you have fewer that you know.
Yeah.
If I could expound on this idea of visibility with you, Carolina, on the professional side of it, how can we improve there?
For me, the biggest problem is the parian language. Yeah. And the parian language is, all my friends are learning Icelandic, and all my friends do not speak Icelandic. So, so they are learning 1 year, 2 years, and it doesn't work. So it means that there is something wrong with the program. And actually, you can learn Icelandic like basics 1, 2, and 3, and then you will get the money from the union. So after the 3 months of learning, you can, I don't know, buy some food in the market, but you will never speak fluently in Icelandic. If you want to continue the school, you have to pay. You have to pay a lot of money. I'm paying every 8 weeks 120,000 kroner for extra lessons. And I have to do it from, I want to do it, so I'm paying. It's not a problem, but
not everybody has the means.
Yeah. So I think the pari language is the biggest problem. If we will all can speak Icelandic language, it would be probably perfect.
Thank you. I think that that's a really important thing, that people really understand that it came out in many of the different things that have been spoken about today, language and the importance of it. We want it. It's just somehow we need to be bridged, and that connects into everything in society. Our well-being, the way the healthcare system runs,
I'm just curious why we have to learn Icelandic if everybody speaks English. Why the Icelandic people want so much to hear Icelandic language from another people? It's like a fear that the language will gonna die. It's already dead.
going to comment on that one. I'll let Carolina take there. I mean, if I moved to Poland, I would do my best to learn Polish, but I think that I would get a bit more support.
You have no chance to learn Polish language.
And I think what we'll finish out on, because we have like 2 minutes left, if each of our panelists, because I've gone through, even though I went off script, I got everything in, if we could all throw out one idea that supports the idea of cultural sensitivity, and if we could do it in a creative way, what can the healthcare system do to support it in a way that we can respond, so the bridge is, and the divide is bridged. You want to go first, Nora?
Definitely, like you say in your presentation, make a video with different cultural background, diversity. And then also I think doctors and nurses should also take cultural diversity classes. Not just lekscola kennari or grundskola kennari, but everybody take that class in the university.
Okay. Carolina?
I have no idea.
Well, you threw out the idea of throwing out Iceland. So.
Your turn.
I guess, and where I also channel all my energies and awareness towards the breaking body, so that there's a care system that is sensitive and aware towards so many factors that can lead to illness.
Right.
And this is, I think, what you said before. Social workers are just should be stronger.
They're so important. They really are. They need to be supported as well. I mean, if we're honest, it's
and it's just what you say. This sensitivity towards not everything is depression and epilepsy, and it's important to wish the well-being of others.
Well-being of others. Empathy in practice. Very good. We thank you. I thank you, and I'm sure the audience thanks you.
So, as you can see here, up on the screen behind you, but I will read out the question so that you don't have to strain your necks. Let's see.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting questions, but also some very heartfelt comments towards our panelists. Thank you for that. So the first question, how can the healthcare system be consistent in providing adequate healthcare to all patients, despite cultural background or language differences? Maybe Jade, if I can ask you to answer this one.
Well, the only thing I can think of is making stronger, so the doctors and nurses are just fully packed. So you have to build in a new system, a supporting system that works around it. So like the social workers, or just create new different. It cannot just we cannot just depend on nurses and doctors. There has to be something more, and that prevents the daily health and the social support, and that has to be a system created for that.
Exactly. So very good idea. Okay. So.
And of course, this system would be have the education of cultural background, because this is essential for any understanding and compassion.
Exactly. So the next question, probably every single person here knows somebody educated, nurses, psychologists, engineers who doesn't work in their specialization. And we need people like them. What can we do to change the system? Maybe Carolina, if I could ask you to answer this question.
Actually, the system is making by the people. So I believe that all of you are already on my side, because you are here. The problem is with the people that didn't come, that they are still outside and not listening. So you are here just because you have to go home and start to talk with your family, with your friends. So they have to hear us, and they will change the system.
Another thing is actually for the government to recognize the degrees that everybody here comes from other countries here in Iceland.
I'd just like to add that what we really need to do, right here, I see a lot of people who are really invested in what we're talking about today. We need to empower people of diverse backgrounds to decision-making positions. We need to see people of foreign origin in high seats on electoral lists, in local politics. We need to see them pushed up in government agencies. The fact that I'm the only woman of foreign origin who runs a government agency or has a very high position in a government agency is not okay in a society that has 15%. So these are things that need to happen. We need to have space to be agents of change.
Next question. Do you feel that there's a big difference when you're cared by a healthcare worker that is also of foreign origin rather than an Icelandic healthcare worker? Nura, I would like to ask you to answer this one.
Definitely, you feel much more cared for by a foreign origin. When I had my mastectomy and I was recovering, actually this is going to remind us of Katja, because we lost Katja through cancer. And when I had my mastectomy, she was studying to be sukralidin. And she took care of me. It was very nice. I was very touched that she took care of me. And then, of course, later on, she was diagnosed with cancer. And she came to me for support and to, talk to her about what's going on. So, I treasured that moment when Katja was helping me, and me and Archie lost a nice person through cancer because of that.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Nura, and I'm very sorry for your loss. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions for now, but as Elinborg mentioned before, you're more than welcome and encouraged to try and mingle later when we have the small gathering in the foyer. So I'd like to ask you to give these women a round of applause. Næst sjáum við sem sagt erindi frá Edith Mangindin, ljósmóður og doktorsnema. Edith gat fyrir mér ekki verið með okkur hér í dag, þannig við sjáum upptöku af erindinu hennar, menningarleg auðmýkt innan heilbrigðiskerfisins. So next we're going to see a recording of the talk by Edith Mangindin, who is a midwife and a doctoral student. She couldn't be with us here today, but we'll see her talk, which is about cultural sensitivity within the Icelandic healthcare system.
Hello, my name is Edith Mangindin, and it is such an honor to have this opportunity to speak to you about cultural sensitivity and humility in the healthcare system. I'm a registered nurse, registered midwife, and childbirth educator here in Iceland. And currently, I am a doctoral student in midwifery at the University of Iceland and one of the midwives behind the Reykjavik Birth Center. And to understand why I'm so excited to discuss this topic with you, I would love to tell you a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in San Francisco, California, in the United States, by immigrant Filipino parents. In 2009, I decided to move to Iceland and follow my heart with my Icelandic boyfriend. And shortly after, I became pregnant with my first child. I experienced the Icelandic healthcare system as an immigrant woman, and an immigrant woman who was also unfamiliar with the language, culture, and the healthcare system. As a woman who recently moved to Iceland, I also experienced prejudice, loneliness, and a sense of hopelessness. This was a very challenging time for me in my life, but it has also been a significant and motivating factor for me in my future endeavors. 2 years later, I was accepted into the nursing program at the University of Iceland and graduated 2015. And throughout my studies and in my work as a registered nurse, I noticed disparities within the healthcare system, especially with the immigrant population. And my experience as a pregnant woman motivated me to apply for the graduate program in midwifery at the University of Iceland in hopes of improving care, especially for this very vulnerable population. And in 2018, I graduated with a degree in midwifery, and in 2020, a master's degree in midwifery at the University of Iceland. So this is a subject I'm so very much passionate about. But what is cultural sensitivity? What is cultural humility? Cultural sensitivity embodies the knowledge, understanding, skills, and protocols that allow an individual or system to provide services across cultural lines and in the best way possible. Cultural sensitivity permits us to respond with respect and empathy to people of all nationalities, classes, races, religions, ethnic backgrounds, and other groups in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and values their worth. And cultural humility is the process of reflection and it's a lifelong journey that involves self-awareness of personal and cultural biases, as well as awareness and sensitivity to significant cultural issues of others. It can be used to address power imbalances and develop mutually beneficial and non-paternalistic partnerships with communities on behalf of individuals and defined populations. Furthermore, it stresses that culture should not be limited to dimensions like racial or ethnic identity, but should also include, for example, the culture of the physician or the culture of public health professionals, which requires humility in dealing with patients, families, and communities. This picture that you see here was taken when I traveled to Sweden as a midwifery student. And in Sweden, migrant women are trained to become doulas. Doulas, if you don't know, are birth supporters. And these doulas bridge the gap between cultures through interpreting and providing information and support during pregnancy, in childbirth, and after childbirth. But why is cultural sensitivity so important? Cultural sensitivity is important because many cultures have different beliefs in how to maintain their health. Cultural differences in healthcare include languages, names, gender roles, religious beliefs, alternative medicine, beliefs about what causes illness, beliefs about how to treat a disease, modesty, authority, family, pain, and different dietary practices. Therefore, cultural attitudes need to be sympathetic and empathetic to understand how to approach interpersonal communication with respect and properly assess and provide care for the individual. Cultural sensitivity's goal in healthcare is to close the gap within healthcare providers' communication and end biased views towards different cultures. A culturally sensitive framework can be the building block to creating a better structure of systems that benefit all people, resulting in ending many disparities and negative attitudes that cultures face throughout society on a daily basis. Does it have an impact on the health of migrant women? Studies all over the world have shown that migrant women experience prejudice, difficulty accessing healthcare services, difficulties in communicating with healthcare professionals, and overall a lack of information and support. Culturally sensitive healthcare services have been shown to promote more patient participation and engagement, encourage respectful interactions and communications, improve understanding between people, increase patient safety, advocate towards equity, and even help women empower themselves through this whole process. And in this picture, there's a picture of myself and Angel from Samtök Hennar, erlendum, uppruna, or Women in Iceland, when we applied and received a grant to hold educational sessions for women of foreign origin. And as you see in these sessions, we discussed important things like patient rights, For example, as you see here, it is prohibited to discriminate against patients on grounds of gender, religion, beliefs, nationality, race, skin color, financial status, family relationship, or status in other respect. And the patient always has the right to the best healthcare service available at each time, has the right to services appropriate to his or her condition, continuity of service and cooperation between all healthcare practitioners and institutions involved in the patient's treatment. And also, a patient has the right to information regarding his or her state of health, including medical information, his condition or prognosis, the proposed treatment, as well as information on the course of treatment, its risks, its benefits. Also, the patient has a right to possible remedies other than the proposed treatment and the consequences of refraining from treatment. The possibility of seeking the opinion of another physician or other healthcare practitioner is appropriate regarding treatment, condition, and prognosis. And if the patient does not understand Icelandic, interpretation of the information shall be provided. Also in these health education sessions, we talk to women about advice on how to be an active participant in their treatment. For example, ask questions. If you're not sure, always ask. Also, inform your care providers about allergies, medications, or vitamins you may be taking, natural medicines or special diets during pregnancy. Often, we have to notify care providers if we experience pain. Definitely make sure the healthcare provider has the correct kennitala and the right name. Obtain information about your treatment. Invite a relative or a close friend to attend appointments or rounds with you. Identify which relatives can receive information and which cannot. Also, know your medication. Know the side effects, know how it works and why it works, and write down important information or questions that you want to ask your healthcare provider in the next visit. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a doctoral student of midwifery at the University of Iceland, and I would like to share my preliminary findings from my first study with you. For the past year, I've been researching socio-demographic factors affecting respectful maternity care, autonomy, and mistreatment and childbirth experience. Respectful maternity care maintains dignity, privacy, confidentiality, ensures freedom from harm and mistreatment, and enables informed choice. However, a substantial number of women globally have been experiencing disrespectful maternity care and mistreatment from their healthcare providers. I aim to evaluate whether socio-demographic factors such as level of education, level of income, migrant background, and whether they're a first-time mom affects women's experiences of respectful care, autonomy, mistreatment, and childbirth. I sent out an online survey in English, Icelandic, and Polish, including socio-demographic questions and internationally standardized questionnaires to measure things such as respect, autonomy, mistreatment, and childbirth experience last year. And over 2,000 women who had given birth in Iceland within the past 5 years responded, which is amazing. And overall, women reported a positive birth experience. However, according to my preliminary findings, factors that were associated with significantly lower levels of respect were migrant background, lack of university education, and low income, as well as being a first-time mother. Factors that were associated with significantly lower autonomy during pregnancy were lack of university-level education, low income, and being a first-time mom. Migrant women, unfortunately, were more likely to report mistreatment during childbirth. Now, although the majority of women reported a positive childbirth experience in this survey, the results suggest that inequities exist in the Icelandic maternity care system. Women who lack university education, have low income, are first-time mothers, or are migrants are at risk of receiving suboptimal maternity care services. and therefore it is of major public health care importance to optimize care so that all women, regardless of their income level, education level, and background, have the full potential to experience respectful care, be autonomous in decision-making when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth, and experience a positive childbirth experience. What if we took the time to see the world from the other person's perspective? Respect and empathy play a huge role in cultural sensitivity. If we have difficulty communicating with someone, how can we help them? We must begin to practice empathy and try to understand what others are going through. So how do we become culturally sensitive? Well, first and foremost, learn about other cultures, languages, beliefs, and religion. Be quiet and observe. Try to see things through their eyes and be respectful. There may be good reasons why people do things differently. And if we change the way people do things, will that really have an effect or make things better? Incorporating their customs into our care is essential. And ask what they want to learn and what their needs are. Ask if something is okay before we do it. And strategies towards a culturally sensitive healthcare system, we need to use educational approaches that are appropriate to the culture. Teach cultural competence to healthcare workers. Employ healthcare workers from diverse cultural backgrounds. Provide translators to improve communication. Provide more modest clothing for patients. Post bilingual signs and provide handouts and forms in appropriate languages. Recognize holidays observed by other cultures. And allow extra time for patients with limited language proficiency and provide interpretation. It is so important that we give ourselves the time to think about the implications of cultural sensitivity in healthcare. As a midwife, it has been my dream to provide culturally sensitive care, and in an environment that encourages me to do so. This was one of my reasons of opening a birth center with a team of amazing midwifery colleagues. We want to address the issue of inadequate access to information and services. If you look at our website, fæðingarheimili.is, our website is in Icelandic, English, and Polish. We have free birthing and breastfeeding courses for women that are, for example, new migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, single mothers, or unemployed, and can't pay the cost for a birth education class. They're welcome to come. And we encourage diversity and inclusivity. We have a diverse staff of respectful professionals that speak different languages, and everyone is proficient in English. It is one of our goals at the Reykjavik Birth Center to provide this type of care, where women and their families receive personal, continuous midwifery care, where women feel strengthened and even empowered in this whole process. I firmly believe that events such as Hennar rödd, or Her Voice, can make such a significant difference in our society by opening the discussion, raising awareness, sharing our experiences, and advocating for change. I hope you all enjoy this conference that is so dear to my heart. Thank you.
halda erindið ofbeldi í nánum samböndum gagnvart konum af erlendum uppruna. Þær munu kynna rannsóknarverkefni þeirra og bráðabirgða niðurstöður úr rannsókninni með áherslu á lýðheilsu sjónarmið. Gjörðu svo vel.
Thank you so much, Chanel and Ellenborg, for organizing a really, really important and fantastic event. And thank you to everybody who has shared this stage today, either in person or in videos. At the 2019 Me Too Moving Forward conference in Reykjavik that was sponsored by the Nordic Council of Ministers, Angela Davis stated that gender violence remains a worldwide pandemic. Little did we all know at that time how our relationships to the word pandemic would change. I certainly have a much more immediate understanding of pandemics than I did in the past, as I imagine everyone in this room has. We also have a clear understanding of how pandemics are handled in the modern world, as we watch public health officials in Iceland and everywhere struggle to inform us about the virus and what we could do to combat it. For many of us, COVID-19 may have introduced us to the idea of public health, but it probably did not introduce us to the idea of gender-based violence, which is also covered under domestic violence in some cases, or as we call it in our research, intimate partner violence. Maybe the Me Too movement did that. Maybe our own experiences opened our eyes to the issue. Maybe it was the experiences of a friend or family member. Often, though, we were told from society that these experiences were just isolated incidences, something that the 2017 Me Too movement clearly showed was not the case. Instead, story after story came out of women who faced all forms of sexual harassment and violence at the hands of their partners, supervisors, friends, family members, and colleagues. No longer framed as random attacks by strangers in dark parking lots, intimate partner violence and gender-based violence in general became an almost everyday experience shared from women around the world, and in Iceland, particularly amongst immigrant women. In 2018, their stories and statements demanding better representation in the Me Too movement of their voices and the responses to the Me Too movement were published in Kjarnan. These narratives sparked our research. And we are going then to discuss today some preliminary results that have come since 2018. These and the idea that Angela Davis mentioned, gender-based violence is a pandemic, and as a pandemic, it demands a public health response. Of course, this begs the question of what we mean by public health. There are many definitions out there, but we were particularly taken by this one from the Canadian Public Health Association, because it has three parts that we think are particularly important. First, that public health is an organized effort. Second, it comes from society. And third, it has the goal of presenting injury, illness, and premature death. These three ideas form the framework for our talk. I'm going to take on the third one first, actually, because I think it's the easiest to get out of the way. And I would like to be 100% clear that injury is not limited to physical injury in a public health sphere. Though often intimate partner violence does come with physical injury. However, injury also includes emotional and psychological injury. And this is something that was often spoken of in the 2018 narratives from immigrant women here in Iceland. They spoke of feeling belittled, shamed, ignored, misunderstood, and harassed, and not just by their partners, but by the very Icelandic institutions that are part of the organized effort in public health in Iceland. As part of our research, we interviewed various stakeholders and service providers that women would likely interact with when reaching out for assistance in cases of intimate partner violence. This slide shows the network of those organizations. Not all of them agreed to be interviewed for the research, but the ones that did are indicated in the purple outline. Of course, we will never name the names of the people we interviewed, but you can see from the network that many organizations were actually willing to talk with us about their experiences of providing services to women of foreign origin who experience violence here in Iceland. My colleague Flora will go over those responses in the second half of our talk. Before we go there, though, I would like to address the final question posed by our definition of public health, that of what we mean by society in Iceland. As was mentioned earlier, and as you can see from this slide, approximately 15% of the Icelandic population over 20 are citizens of countries other than Iceland, and about 50% of those are women. So that's no small amount. Hold on. Where was I? The 15% that we see are made up of 152 different countries. And you can see which are the main populations on the slide. When I got this information from Hagstofu Íslands, or Statistics Iceland, I was actually quite interested in the result. Because then I thought to myself, well, on that list that includes Poland, Lithuania, Romania, Latvia, and Portugal, where are other large populations of immigrant women that I know to exist, such as maybe people of Thai origin or people of Filipino origin? And then I realized that immigration law in and of itself creates a hierarchy of immigrants within Iceland. Those at the top are fellow Nordic citizens. They have almost the same rights and responsibilities as native Icelanders do, excluding the right to vote at the national level. Then come EU citizens at the next level, and they are treated much the same as Nordic citizens. And then comes everybody else, which I'm part of, because I'm an American citizen, though recently also an Icelandic citizen. And I realized that the system itself creates incentives and also is part of the violence if certain people then can leave violent situations easier than others. Because outside of the EU and the Nordic countries, people's right to be here is tied indeed to their partnership with Icelandic citizens or other people who have the right to be here, or in the case of employment, with the Icelandic employer. Now, this is just one axis of the diversity of the group that is often lumped together under immigrant women. Other axes are also important to take a look at, such as the varying abilities and disabilities that are present in the group. The group individuals' relationship or lack of relationship to the term women itself. And of course, individuals with LGBTQI+ identities as well. So all of this is taken up in a survey that we hope to have come out next month that will then take a look at the breadth of intimate partner and workplace violence against immigrant women in Iceland. So I know many of you here, and I'm telling you now that I will take it personally if you do not take part in this survey. And even though I won't know whether you did or not, I will hound you to be sure that you actually answer our questions. And I swear that it will only take you about 10 minutes. We've piloted it. It's not going to take you a long time. And we're also doing all we can to keep anybody who interacts with our research as safe as possible, because that's our primary goal. Okay, so now back to what I'm sorry to the people doing a wonderful job on the screens behind me. I went a little bit off script there. Okay, so despite the diversity that we see in these statistics, and then I mentioned as well, what the 2018 Me Too narratives from women of foreign origin showed us was that the Icelandic institution and service providers quite often did not take diversity into account. Instead, women were given more of a one-size-fits-all option when asking for help and reporting incidences of intimate partner violence. That one size was based on the dominant cultures, the Icelandic, understanding of both the meaning of violence and what a woman should do in cases of intimate partner violence. But now we've moved beyond the 2018 narratives, and Flora has had a chance to interview many of the service providers that were up on that list earlier. So now I'm going to turn the podium over to Flora so she can share some of her preliminary results.
So I would like to talk about the preliminary results of the interviews that Randy mentioned. And one of the questions that I asked the people I interviewed was what they think the main challenges are in working with immigrant women. Most of them mentioned the language barrier, cultural differences, and different understandings of violence. They also described how women of foreign origin do not know their rights or how things work in Iceland. One of them, I called her Ása, said in the interview how she recently realized that immigrant women do not know about all the legal options and how she was surprised by that. And I quote, "I saw a discussion on a report on MBL this fall, I think, it was, and it's kind of struck me why, wow, they don't know that this is an option for them. An additional challenge the stakeholders and service providers described that connects to the issue of immigrant women not knowing their rights is how partners, and they are mostly referring to Icelandic partners of the immigrant women, are telling the women lies and wrong information. Bryndís said in the interview, "So many women think that the law in Iceland states that upon divorce the husband gets the children and the husband gets all the property because they don't really know, and I think this is a very important thing to keep in mind, that the women, they don't know Icelandic society, they don't know their rights, they don't know the law environment, and they are being told all sorts of lies, all sorts of untruths, and they are kept isolated and they don't really know what their rights are." Many stakeholders and service providers spoke about this power that the Icelandic partner has over the immigrant woman. This, as well as the general issue of immigrant women not knowing their rights, is the stakeholders and service providers' main point for what they see as their task, educating immigrant women about living in Iceland, the culture, their rights, and the Icelandic laws. This shows the service providers' focus on the immigrant women knowing their rights and how their approach is to educate them. This is a very individualized approach, especially as the Me Too stories published in 2018 that also Randy mentioned and everyone for sure knows here in this room, tell a very different story, as there were stories from immigrant women who knew their rights and tried to assert them, but they were discriminated against by the institutions, which should serve the immigrant women the same way as any other person. As the service providers and stakeholders mentioned cultural differences as a challenge when working with immigrant women, I asked them whether they participated in any trainings to work with clients from different backgrounds and origins. Most of them told me they have never received a training like that. When further talking about the cultural challenges they see in their work with immigrant women, some stakeholders and service providers pointed out that there is also a lot of difference in the Icelanders they work with. Katrin said during the interview, "We have people that are active in substance abuse, using substances. We have people that come from very poor backgrounds and from very rich and well-standing families. So it's everything. So I think we are quite used to that people just having all kinds of backgrounds." They furthermore mentioned training they received for working with clients with alcohol and substance abuse or training on sexual violence. But when asking about the trainings, as I just said, most of them reported just having never participated in a training like that. Dora said in the interview, "No," she laughed, "it's a state-funded institution, so they don't have money to do anything. And I mean, our bosses are you are the specialists, who knows more than you do? Like, yeah, great, thanks," she laughed again. "But no, we just try to learn from each other." Several stakeholders and service providers expressed how they would like to be trained more on working with immigrants or have a staff member who specializes on that issue. For them, money and time are the main reasons why they are not taking such training, or, how expressed in the previous quote, an additional lack of awareness at the higher levels of institutions that such training is necessary. There seems to exist the idea that you learn about working with clients of various backgrounds and origins by just doing it. Some stakeholders and service providers only during the interview realized that more knowledge about the immigrant women's situation in Iceland would help them working with them. That a lack of training can be an issue is also shown in a research done by Sunna Simonadottir, Annadís Greta Úlfsdóttir, and Helga Gottfriðsdóttir. In their research on healthcare professionals and their perceptions of migrant mothers in Iceland, they show that there is a lot of prejudice based on ethnicity and origin without taking class into account. It's also what Edith just said in her talk and what basically everyone else has said here today. One outcome of this research that I'm referring to, that healthcare professionals expressed how migrant mothers have to catch up with the Icelandic maternity system, corresponds to our findings from the interviews, with the stakeholders and service providers focusing on educating immigrants about their rights and how things work in Iceland. Coming back to the public health question, as we asked ourselves in the beginning, who is the society that is targeted? And our answer, based on the data that we have so far, is that the services that are provided and the way institutions are interacting are not targeting the Icelandic population that Randy was describing in the beginning of this presentation, because they do not really take into account the diversity of the Icelandic society today. Now that we have heard about the organized response in society, what do we think service providers and stakeholders could do better? This is, of course, a very challenging question, but we have some recommendations based on the findings of the data we have so far. And first of all, there needs to be training in working with clients from diverse backgrounds and origins for service providers and stakeholders, as there needs to be a greater awareness of the situation immigrant women find themselves in Iceland, as well as prejudice and discrimination. Yes, knowing your rights is important, given that you cannot fight for your rights if you don't know what they are. But it is also important to know the rights of others and know why those rights are so easily violated, as my colleague Susan Gulliver said in another presentation, and it was an amazing sentence, so I decided to quote that. Then another thing is the lack of money. That seems to be a really big issue, not only for participating in training, but also when it comes to time. Many of the institutions expressed being understaffed and thus also not having the time for taking any trainings. Additionally, waiting times in some of the institutions have gone up from 6 months before Me Too to up to 2 years in 2020. Finally, and that was also already mentioned before several times, more immigrants and women of foreign origin need to be in service provider positions in institutions working on immigrant issues as representation matters.
And as always, we'd like to say thanks to the funders of the research that we're doing. So Jafnréttissjóður Íslands and also Rannis have contributed greatly to this research.
Thank you so much to Randy and Flora for that very insightful talk. So, unfortunately, we're slightly behind schedule, so we don't have time for questions towards Randy and Flora at the moment. But as I mentioned before, you're welcome and encouraged to talk to them later during our break. And actually, we're going to take a short break now, just for like 10 minutes for some coffee, and if anyone needs to use the bathroom. And then, yes, so we'll come back here in 10 minutes' time for the last panel discussion.
Já, næst á dagskrá eru pallborðsumræðurnar kynheilsa og kynfrelsi. Pallborðsstjóri umræðunnar Brynhildur Heiðar Ómarsdóttir, framkvæmdastýra Kvenréttindafélags Íslands. Við minnum á að það hægt að senda spurningar á menti.com með sama kóða. Ef þið viljið beina spurningum eitthvað til ákveðins viðmælanda, þá bara tilgreiniði nafnið þeirra í spurningunni. So I'll also make this in English. So we will have the panel talks on sexual health and sexual freedom. And the panel director is Brynhildur Heiðar Ómarsdóttir. She is the head woman of Kvenréttindafélags Íslands. It's a women's rights association in Iceland. Yes, so Brynhildur, give her applause.
Thank you, Elinborg and Chanel. I like it. Yes, my name is Brynhildur and I'm the head woman of Kvenréttindafélags Íslands. And it's my great honor and privilege to be to moderate discussion with these fantastic 3 women who are here on stage with me. So I would like to I would like to begin to ask these ladies to introduce themselves. If you could tell the audience a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from. The topic of the discussion today is sexual rights and sexual health and freedom. And I would like to add the rights into the conversation. We've been hearing a lot about rights in the conference today. And it's very appropriate that we're ending this conference on this panel because, as many of you know, women in the United States are marching across the country because of severe reduction in access to abortion. So reproductive rights are under attack in our neighboring countries. We know that they're under attack in many countries in Europe as well, in Poland. And there are actually 6 countries in Europe where abortion is completely illegal, and we know that sort of like one of the big sort of like successes that we've had in Iceland was in two years ago when we managed to guarantee abortion rights here in Iceland. But what we have been discussing today is that guaranteed access for everyone, or is it sort of like how are immigrant women able to access those sexual rights? But that being said, with this long introduction, please, I would like to welcome Imain Ereya, and if you could, please welcome. Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Iman Raja. I'm originally from Casablanca, Morocco, and I'm an interpreter, a board member of Stemper Rocca, and I'm a project manager of RISE.
Right. And then Shantae Brown.
Hi, my name is Shantae Brown, and I'm a native of Jamaica. I've been living in Iceland. This will be my 3rd year. I'm a published author, deputy member on the board of Women, and I'm also working on my 2nd novel, and I am also the marketing strategist for Irlander magazine. So, yeah, that's me.
Logan Lee Sigurðsson.
Hi, I'm Logan, and I'm from the United States. I'm a sex trafficking survivor. That was about 10 years ago, but for the past 7 years, I've also been working and studying with human trafficking in different countries, and for the past 4 of those years, I've actually been the chair of Stop the Traffic Iceland, which is an NGO that works on trying to deliver advocacy and consulting and education through foreign origin people's experiences.
So we have here women with varying backgrounds, which is fantastic for our conversation. I want to begin talking about the health aspect of the panel. So in the panel that came before us, we heard many stories, we heard stories about the experiences women of foreign origin have in the healthcare system. And I was wondering about sort of like when we focus specifically on sexual health and reproductive health, sort of like what are the main barriers that you feel women of foreign origin face here in the Icelandic healthcare system?
Well, first I would like to start about talking about women from my origin, Arabic origin, where sex education does not exist, is non-existent. So I believe that we should provide this basic information to women from these backgrounds, especially from backgrounds of patriarchal communities. And RISE is going to be doing that in the future because that is completely needed here.
So, RISE, this is your project, right? Could you tell us a little bit about what you are, sort of like what is RISE do? What is RISE doing? What is the main goal of your project?
So RISE will be launching in the next few months, and RISE is about giving power to the women to make decisions, educated decisions. We would like to provide information ranging from basic sex ed to information about how they can get more services here in Iceland, get education. I mean, it is needed since this information is not provided widely in Arabic languages, so we will be doing that. We also will have open houses to bridge the gap between the communities and to give the Arabic culture another another phase, because it is known just by very negative aspects. We would like to do that, but also RISE is going to be doing more things in the future, including these cultural sensitivity programs that previous people who are on panels were speaking about, and we would like to provide that for a lot of governmental institutions, hopefully, in the near future.
So you're basically creating the training that Flora and Randy were pinpointing was needed for institutions here in Iceland.
Yes, definitely, but it will be more about women of Arabic origin than it is for different backgrounds. I will leave that for other people to do. But this is a first of its kind, and we would like to also ask people in the audience here who are part of other organizations to lend us a hand. So hopefully we will, break that gap, bridge that gap.
Right.
Right. So I'm sure some people in here may already know me from the Red Table talk that I did a while back, because I was in an abusive relationship where I endured sexual abuse, among other things. And a lot of this, I think, happened to me because, because of where I came from, and coming to Iceland and getting married to someone from a just different background, a whole nother world in my eyes, an alternate universe to where I'm from in Jamaica. I mean, like I've said a million times, I think the only thing that Jamaica and Iceland have in common is that they're both islands, and that's it. There's nothing else. And what happened to me, I feel like, was because I wasn't as knowledgeable as I was supposed to be when it comes to the matters of me and my decisions to say no to my husband. Because you think, okay, you're with this person loves you, this person wants what's best for you, and even when you don't want to, and I'm sure a lot of women go through this and more than they're willing to talk about, you give in, even when you don't want to, and that's not freedom. I'll also share just a tiny experience that I had at one point where I went to the doctor because I was on birth control. And these things don't correlate, but it's just another thing that I'm talking about. But I went to the doctor, it was maybe my 3rd month in Iceland, and I was on birth control, and I was also experiencing some serious, deep depression from just living in a brand new country, missing home, not having my family, also feelings of isolation because of what my husband did to me. And I remember the topic of discussion was me and when I would be able to start having sex again. Like when I was going through everything that I was going through. I had the person next to me who was, I was supposed to be spending the rest of my life with, asking the doctor, yeah, so all of that's great, but when is my wife going to be able to have sex again and give me kids? And I feel like a lot of women need to know that just to end it, even if you are married, even if you have your partner that you've been with forever, and you don't want to, it's okay to tell them no, and tell them no again if you don't want to. That's your right.
Well, I guess what I would add to that is specifically, for trafficking survivors and victims in Iceland is trafficking already is, it's an abusive relationship, so you already have this fear of reaching out regardless of the other circumstances. It's always scary to kind of worry about all the consequences of going against your trafficker and taking that leap of faith. And then if you add on top of all of the burdens and challenges of being a foreign person in Iceland and navigating a system that you're not entirely comfortable with, or you're not sure if you're going to get the same kind of respect from your healthcare provider or even your translator in the middle of your healthcare provider, that really hinders communication, as well as there is some really nasty stigmas about what type of people fall into human trafficking. And there's just big misunderstandings about what human trafficking is and what trauma is and how trauma actually works and how long it actually works. Does it end as soon as you're separated from your trafficker? Is it something much longer, much more involved. And I think all of these barriers that I just mentioned, also that we've talked more about today, as long as people being deported before they can even finish their care, all of that inhibits, I think, women from having agency in their healthcare experience, which is the solution to fixing a trafficking situation and getting out that cycle of violence, is actually recreating the agency that you didn't have to begin with when you were being trafficked and why you were being trafficked. So.
This is, okay, you've moved this into a huge topic, trafficking, and we'll come back to that actually. We're going to pick that up in 2 minutes, but because I want to finish on health. As again, we're going to be solving a huge problem here in just under 45 minutes. Actually, I just heard before the panel we get 30 minutes because we were running so late. But because you were talking, you're bringing us into you were bringing us in the audience and into this private conversation that you should be having with your doctor, and your husband is speaking for you. He's taking away your agency. It's a fantastic word you brought into the conversation, Logan. This is also, and this is something that people have been talking about today, is that because of the linguistic barriers that women of foreign origins have here in Iceland, sort of like who is speaking for them, and and this issue of translation. And I want to sort of like basically end our sort of like segment on the healthcare system, sort of like on translation. How is it you work as a translator in the healthcare system? How does it work? So like,
well, I mean, that question, how does it work? You walk in, there's a doctor, a patient, but you're told to be very robotic, you know. Basically, you may not have any kind of, and this is your job, you're just a radio transmitter of whatever the doctor says, but the problem is sometimes doctors will say, you have this condition, but then they do not explain what this condition means. So sometimes I would have to like pause and say, maybe this person doesn't know what this condition is, and you would have to, because I'm a translator, I'm not a doctor, I'd have to Google it and then explain it to the person. And there are times where I'm actually, the doctor rejects that. You just say, I didn't tell you to translate that. So a lot of people don't get enough information.
Would you say sort of like, I guess what I'm trying to think about is that how do we solve the problem is that I've been hearing that women don't get translations in the healthcare system. Like, do we want to have sort of like, you know, are we talking about, do we need the healthcare system to have translators on staff? Is that sort of like, how do we solve the problem that sort of like, when a woman goes to her doctor, she can have a private conversation without sort of like, and regain her agency?
Because that's something that I'm also very close to as well. I think I visited the doctor many more times than I would care to share when I just came here because of the different reasons. And one of those reasons was because of the physical abuse that was brought on by my ex. And I had to go to the doctor to get my arm checked out because I was injured. And when I went there, I remember thinking, like, I really, really don't want to share this with them because I'm pretty sure that by the end of the day, my husband is gonna know. Like, he's gonna know this, and he's gonna be very angry at me. That's what I remembered thinking at the time. Because prior to that, they were like reaching out to him, sharing my, personal data, like things that they found out about me with my husband that I did not give them permission to share. So then I'm now at a point where like I'm in danger, and I feel like I can't even go to the doctor because like I'm gonna put myself in a little bit more danger. So that's a dilemma, and I feel like some women, they also go through that because when you just move to Iceland, there is a process, especially when you're from a third world country like Jamaica, where you have to wait to receive your kennital, your social security. So your partner basically picks up most of the tabs and does everything for you, and health, like the health part of it is one of the main things as well. So he gets access to like all of that. And I feel like, and also because I don't speak fluent Icelandic, so if it's a case where I even go in there with him, because he was always accompanying me, like I would speak the English, and then maybe they would start speaking to me. So you can see, okay, so you do know how to speak a bit of English. You're here to talk to me. Then my husband, he chips in, and then the whole conversation gets carried away into into Icelandic. And I just feel like, yes, if there was a situation where like women or men or just anybody in general could just come and feel safe, especially in a situation where you're married or you're new in the country, you don't know what's going on, like it's good to have someone there who can even just talk to you because they're treating you, so you should know what's going on. You should have that peace of mind, and nobody else.
It's so hard to hear, right? Like that the person who is supposed to be your key to a culture, to introduce you to a culture, is not worthy of the trust and is abusing the trust. How can we move? Actually, then we can move the conversation into like our services outside the healthcare system, outside the institutions, like women's organizations that are working with survivors of violence. Do you feel sort of like that what barriers do women of foreign origin face, do you feel? Do you have any experience?
I would like to point out that since a lot of women from Arab origin come from a patriarchal community, they don't even know what emotional abuse means or sexual abuse. I mean, marital rape doesn't exist. So to provide information about emotional and sexual abuse and physical abuse would be very important in different languages and through brochures. So I think that would be something that Bjarkali, for example, or the Women's Shelter should truly consider.
Yeah, this actually brings up, sorry, Jürgen.
Oh, I was just going to say, we've been also talking about, how sometimes there's patients or something that have a different educational background, so they don't know their rights or they don't know certain things, but I think there's a really big difference as a healthcare provider and talking to someone that's maybe doesn't have an education and someone who's just unintelligent, and I think sometimes we put those two together, and I think it can be really scary because I know that's something about a stigma about human trafficking survivors, that we're just unintelligent and we don't know any better, and so we can't understand what healthy relationships and things like that look like. And I think that affects the way sometimes healthcare providers talk to us.
I think with trafficking survivors in Iceland, this is something that's very hard for many of us to face, that there is human trafficking going on in this tiny, tiny country. But there is. And how you have an organization that is working with survivors of trafficking in Iceland. Can you sort of like give us a brief overview of the scope of the problem here in the country?
A brief overview.
We're solving the world in 30 minutes.
I don't know, to talk about trafficking in Iceland in a nutshell, you mean? Well, I think, it's much more present and much more awareness about how we have labor exploitation in our market, and I think some of those things are misunderstood as being another type of abuse instead of being understood that they're falling under the trafficking umbrella of being controlled exploitation. But there's also definitely sexual abuse and sexual exploitation that classifies as trafficking too, but we have a lot less research for that. And also we just started at Bjarkali a pilot for a coordination center to start recording these cases. But those numbers have been different because of COVID. Those numbers are different because we're not advertising any kind of services for trafficking. We've never had awareness campaigns, things like that. So it's really hard to get those concrete numbers, but if you talk to service providers and if you talk to people of foreign origin and NGOs, they'll tell you that they see the signs of trafficking everywhere.
With survivors of trafficking, they have also this an additional problem or a burden that sort of like they have, they can be deported, right? Like this fear that if they report the problem or if they seek help, that they can face deportation they're maybe not also in the system to seek for healthcare.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about there's this sort of misconception that like you're fine as soon as you're separated from your trafficker, but really you need to restore agency, and that's a long process of, you know, just practical things like having the ability to go out and get a job and provide for yourself, but it's also like the mental journey of it and being like mentally having agency in your life again. And a lot of asylum seekers come here or they're trafficked here or something like that, and they risk deportation because there's this misunderstanding or something in our legislation system that we can just deport these people, but according to international law that we've committed to, there's no specification that the trafficker has to have been Icelandic or the trafficking has to have been in Iceland. We're supposed to have the responsibility to provide that medical care to the ends, to end that cycle of violence, and oftentimes we're not. People will be here for a little while. We'll have places like Stigamots writing to lawyers and legislative systems saying these people are not ready, they're not safe, they don't have agency, and then we'll deport them anyway. So that's a major issue.
Yeah, so I want to bring it, there are a couple of questions that have already come up from the audience, and one of them is how can we provide sex education to women of foreign origin in Iceland on an equal level without Icelandic ideals of sexual health and freedom seeming superior? That's such a loaded question. I guess it's like, does anyone want to pick that one up?
I mean, like when I spoke about how there is no sex education in the Arab world, it doesn't exist. How can it be superior if it doesn't exist? People need to know their sexual rights in order to make an educated decision. A lot of women do not know that they can get contraceptives without their husbands, you know, that's just something that they don't know, or that you can go to a gynecologist. I mean, it's simple stuff, you know, and you should just, first of all, a lot of doctors assume that the woman knows this information due to the Icelandic, you know, I mean, you should not assume that people know certain information.
So we're not talking about sexual morals here. We're talking that sort of like we need this information, just this basic information of how the system works and what are your patient rights.
Yes.
Your rights as a patient. And
I was actually thinking about it when I was sitting down because I think it was brought up at some point, and I don't remember when. But social media is so powerful. It's such a powerful tool. You can get a lot of good out of it, you can get a lot of bad out of it. But I think where this is concerned, like social media can be used as a tool to just educate women. Like, for example, you have all these different Facebook groups for all these different things. Like, you know, you have Facebook groups for Netflix spoilers, you know? Like, you can make a Facebook group of, like, you know, where you have all these people who know exactly what they're talking about, like licensed professionals, where women can join these groups and they feel like they're in a very safe space where they can ask questions, whether they're silly or think they're dumb or not. They can ask these questions and they can receive answers. You know, and even go as far as to have, like, you know, how you have these recovery kind of like sit-downs where people come in and they talk about like overcoming certain things. Like, you can have these sit-downs where these women come in and they can share their experiences, like from different origins, different backgrounds. Like, they can talk about things and they can ask the questions that need to be asked and get the answers that they need to get.
So I think sort of like this discussion, we're now talking, so we're now moving into sort of like how are we, this is sort of like an add-on to the system, and I guess I think it's kind of bringing us back to what Edith was talking about. For example, what they're doing in Sweden with to help midwives who work in the system. They're now training doulas who can then also provide a bridge into different cultural communities in Sweden. That we're now thinking about how we can create an add-on to the official system. Oh, sort of like, so you have social media groups, sort of like these women's groups, immigrant groups, sort of like creating and working, getting grants to sort of like, you know, not to fix the system, but to sort of like be an add-on to the system. So that, is that what you're trying with? Yeah?
Well, was just going with, it could even go as far as to become an organization if there's enough push behind it.
Yeah.
Because the makeup of women here of foreign origin and men, you know, it's even though it's it's the minority. I mean, they still need. I feel like they still need that support, and they need a safe space where they can receive that. And because the more they don't know, is the more isolated they feel. And when you feel isolated, you tend to make the wrong decisions. You know, like stay in a situation that you really don't have to.
I think sort of like these are the intersections that I'm very interested in. I obviously work for an NGO. I work for one of the oldest organization in Iceland that was founded to fight for women's rights, and we're still here because we're still not there. And all of you are active in NGOs. You founded Stop Trafficking, which is an organization that has brought tremendous visibility to a formerly invisible problem here in Iceland. You are founding Rise Up because you see a need in the system that's not being met by the system, and you are creating on a volunteer basis. On a volunteer basis, let's think about that. We're doing this on a volunteer basis. You're creating this topic, and you've been working with Félagasamtökin, which is
with Borgarleikhúsið, and I've been working with women and the organization, you know, for women of foreign origin, and they do have these discussions where you can ask these questions, you know, whether big or small. And I just feel like these groups, they do, like I said, the power of social media. It's where everybody goes. Everybody goes there every day, you know, to just, like I said, get spoilers. They can go there to get powerful information.
So yeah, so. And I think sort of like if you sort of like now you are all activists. You are all activists in your various fields. If you had one or two things that you definitely want to see the system do right now to make things better, what would it be? Sort of like, you know, you're coming from the outside. You've been working, lobbying, criticizing, fixing things from the outside, but we know that the power is within the institutions, within the politics. What are the most urgent acts that we need to accomplish now?
Recognize the need for cultural sensitivity training for all government institutions, and I mean all.
I was just sitting and thinking on it for a second.
Love you.
And I did a lot of therapy, you know. Most of it was for PTSD, because I was diagnosed with PTSD. Couldn't really leave the house. I had issues with the way that I felt about myself, you know. I always thought that I had a very healthy libido and all of that, but after coming out of something that I came out of, all that went downhill, and I needed to do so much therapy. And I remember just going to my therapists and talking to them and feeling sometimes so disconnected. Like, even though they're listening to me, like they weren't quite, like, they weren't quite getting this Jamaican girl, you know, like, and I felt that disconnect. And it took me a longer time to kind of just like heal. So I would agree with you, and then I would go as far as to say that like sometimes listening with just to understand someone, because I feel like you cannot really understand something unless one, you've experienced it, or two, you're close to it. You know, like you've been so close to it that you know, or at least you know firsthand what it's all about. So I agree with you, and I would also say that listening with the intent to like understand that someone is from a different background and their experiences are maybe different. environment. That also does help when it comes to just like the healthcare.
I definitely think that we can increase education about trafficking and trauma, both for the general public and also with healthcare practitioners and things like that, people in our legislative systems. But just for a more broad thing, if I could just say that we're an immigrant-led organization, and I think the only reason that we have a seat at any kind of table is because of all the Icelandic people that have pulled and pushed us there, because we have been fighting, as well as I think we're very privileged in that we have some kind of seat at the table, although it's often sometimes limited, to actually have a stake in talking about what do we do to make solutions, because I think there's a lot of activists out there who they maybe take part in a survey or something and they share all their pain and vulnerability, and then they just end up being like a footnote in somebody else's sort of narrative or agenda, and they're just kind of a data set to say, hey, look, there's a problem, but they're not actually involved in the processes that are about fixing things and making solutions guided by their perspective, and they're the ones who best know what they need. So I think it's, if you're working in the Icelandic healthcare system, you should really think maybe about how you can involve people maybe more in a meaningful way, more than just being, a footnote.
Absolutely, and these sort of like this definitely correlates. Also, what we've heard before is that there is an urgent call for diversity training for people in the healthcare system. There is a call for active listening, empathy training, really, for healthcare workers, and to give patients agency, right? To that the patient and provider relationship be a collaborative one. And I think sort of like we can just claim this. We also are going to be needing this from the police system, right? The justice system as well. It doesn't. It's not only the healthcare system. I think also I was struck by, because I know that we're now about 20 minutes past where the conference cocktail party should have been started, so we're going to, I don't know you, it's Saturday, I'm on the cocktail. What I wanted to pick up before we end, I wanted to pick up on what Logan was saying, is sort of like the incredible power of collaboration, is that you've talked about sort of like the importance of working within the community, of working sort of like you've been working with women from the Arabic community, sort of like in sort of like empowering them and helping them and sort of like giving them agency within a new society. You bring up this idea of sort of like strong Facebook groups, supportive groups, where women of foreign origin can have sort of like these networks and solve problems together. But like, when you bring into the conversation collaboration, so that's sort of like you work with people native born Icelanders that sort of like that they have sort of like worked with your organization that is immigrant led, but they have worked with you to sort of like give you a seat at the table. So I think I want to end with maybe just an encouragement or sort of like an order to the audience, is that sort of like all of you, if you don't belong to any organization working on changing the world, change that immediately. So like before you have a cocktail, you go online and you sign up for something, right? You sign up for Women in Iceland, you become a supporter of Bjarkarhlíð. You join this sort of like, because in the end, sort of like it is the activists that sort of like bring the system and change the institutions, and the activists do it with your help.
Hey.
Can I add one thing before we finish? This question is really good. I'm just going to answer it very quickly because not many people know this. So if a translator makes a mistake, that mistake could cause a lot of problems, especially when we're talking about Útlendingastofnun, the medical, of course, community. So how can we fix it? We need to train translators, and we need to also have a due diligence, somebody needs to be taking notes of that meeting. That's very important. And I think that should be addressed. So I'm sorry if I took more time.
No, absolutely. It's very unfunny words.
Just to add, so a part of my journey ended up was me being in the women's shelter at Bjarkarhlíð. And there I received counseling, I received direction, I received healthcare, I received just mental care. I had women around me, I had a nice warm bed, you know, I had all the support that I needed, and I had an amazing lawyer, Claudia, you know, it was also it all came from her, you know, it all came from her. She pointed me in that direction. I only followed whatever she said, and I think that's why I'm still here in Iceland today. It's because I listened to her, and I went to Björklund, and I got all the help that I needed. So if you're in a situation where you feel like there's no one, you can get yourself both a Claudia, and you can also go to Björklund.
I just also maybe want to just make the points that I always try to talk about human trafficking as a community problem. If we don't want violence and this ability for traffickers to step in and take advantage of vulnerable people, we need to, you know, address that vulnerability. Human trafficking is a community problem then, because we're all in this community, and everything we do or everything that we don't do, you know, affects the structural inequalities that we have. So yes, get involved in all these wonderful organizations, and maybe ask yourself how in your day-to-day life you can, you know, encourage more inclusion.
But yeah. I'm going to say for them, when I say get involved, I mean pay the money. That's what I say. You need to support them. You need to support them. All right. I want to thank you so much, Iman, Shantae, and Logan. I know there are a couple of questions here that we didn't get a chance to get to, but we're all going to be here for cocktails, so you can ask them personally. But thank you so much.
Good job, ladies. Good job.
Takk kærlega fyrir þessar frábæru umræður. Þessi ráðstefna fór svo sannarlega fram úr okkar björtustu vonum. Við segjum alltaf að innblásturinn af hennar rödd, þessum félagasamtökum og öllum þeim verkefnum sem við erum að vinna í, komi frá móður mína, Jónsson. Hún bjó sem sagt hérlandi fyrir cirka 10 árum síðan, en er núna flutt aftur út til Englands og var einmitt sjálf kona af erlendum uppruna hérlandi með rætur og rekja til Jamaica. Hún var alltaf að segja mér frá þessum frábæru og flottu konum af erlendum uppruna sem hún kynntist á meðan hún bjó hér. Og ég er alveg ótrúlega handviss það að hún yrði svo ótrúlega stolt að þessari ráðstefnu og yfir áhuganum sem þið hafið sýnt á málefnum kvenna af erlendum uppruna.
Það hafa farið fram mjög áhugaverðar umræður og erindi sem snúa að heilsu kvenna af erlendum uppruna. Markmið okkar með þessari ráðstefnu er að öll sú þekking sem hefur skapast hér í dag verði nýtt til þess að bæta stöðu kvenna af erlendum uppruna, sérstaklega innan heilbrigðiskerfisins, og að þessi áhugi á viðfangsefni ráðstefnunnar muni leiða til frekari rannsókna sem varða konum af erlendum uppruna og samfélaginu öllu til hagsbóta. Þannig að ég vil bara þakka ykkur fyrir að mæta öll og sýna þessu verkefni áhuga. Til þess að bjóða öllum þátttakendum ráðstefnunnar upp á svið núna. Þáttakendur? Ég ætla síðan að nefna það að eins og við framkomið áður að þá verða léttar veigar frammi og við viljum nýta þennan tíma til þess að tengjast öðru fólki og ræða málefni nánar og endilega spyrja spurningar sem kannski ekki þið gátu fengið svar við áðan, nýta tíman endilega á eftir. Og ég vil bara segja aftur, þið frábæru konur, takk kærlega fyrir að taka þátt og gera þennan viðburð svona frábæran og bara mjög, hvað maður að segja, þetta er mjög tilfinningaþrungin stund og við erum ótrúlega þakklátar.
Svo er það bara eitt að lokum. Það er ýmislegt framundan hjá Félagasamtökunum Hennar, en við erum sem sagt í samstarfi við nýja útgáfu sem var áður þekkt sem Flóra-útgáfa að vinna að útgáfu bókar sem fjallar sögur kvenna af erlendum uppruna og það eru nokkrar konur sem tóku þátt hér í dag og eru einmitt líka meðal áhorfenda sem munu deila sögunum sínum í bókinni og við stöndum núna, við erum sem sagt að vinna í bara fjármögnun verkefnisins og plakötin sem verið að selja fram í forsalnum eru einmitt til fjáröflunar fyrir þetta mikilvæga verkefni. Þannig við hvetjum ykkur til þess að styðja við þetta verkefni. Bara kæra þakkir fyrir komuna í dag. Við skulum gefa þessum frábæru konum bara gott klapp.